What's going on, everybody? Patrick Connor here, and welcome to the Knuckles and Gloves podcast. If you've been here before, welcome back. If you're a new listener or viewer, what's up? Sorry that I am ugly, but that is not my fault. Nothing I can do about it. And the black shirt and black background kind of accentuates my graying features. Sorry about that, Aris. What's going on here, bro? Here with my boy Aris Pina, fellow boxing history file. How you doing, bro?
Everything's good, my man. Everything's really good. Back for another show, another history episode. Um, Talking about a famous heavyweight, in fact. So that being said, there hasn't really been a lot going on in boxing that we need to like cover beforehand any of this. So I mean, like, you know what I mean? Unless you want to talk about, actually, I just want to mention this. I don't know who it was, but someone on Twitter after the whole fiasco between Keyshawn Davis and Devin Haney and that fallout, and that's why I'm a casual boxing fan now because I just don't give a shit about this current state. Um, but Shakur
No joke.
Stevenson has been on Twitter a lot lately, just going wild and just talking about why he won't fight this guy or that guy and demanding this and blah blah blah. And then I don't know. I wish I can remember their handle to give them proper credit, but someone was like, "Oh God, there goes Stipulation Stevenson again," and then I started cackling because that was just too good. And it goes well too. Now I can't get that out of my head. Every time I'm going to see him, I'm going to start calling, thinking of calling him Stipulation Stevenson's. But that's gives you an idea of, the state of boxing right now. Also, too, I guess heavyweight news. We can mention this is that Fury Joshua is probably going to be at MSG. Well, that's what they're saying, and everyone's all up in arms about it. I don't really give a fuck, dude.
At this point, it's not something that, it needed to happen in like 20, like 17 in London or something. You know what I
Hmm.
mean? Like that. I don't know why we're here 2026 worrying about that. But the combination of these two stories between Shakur Stevenson and then like the heavyweight situation is I never totally thought that I would be fully one of those old ass crusty ass fucking fully cynical like I because I was always cynical. I was always kind of pessimistic, but I always paid attention to shit. And like I've always been like, following boxing. But dude, the way, and it's not even so much a like, oh, I wish it was the way that it used to be type of thing. It's more just that like I understand that shit evolves. I understand it develops. I understand there's always going to be changes and shit like that in the sport. But the changes that have happened over the last like few years make it so that like I don't want to pay several $100s a month to
Hmm.
follow the sport. I don't want to pay like money to watch shit. I don't want to pay for like a regular service and then also pay for pay-per-views. Um, there's like too many. They're putting a whole lot of hurdles in the way
Yeah.
of like me being just a regular ass boxing fan. And so it's actually easier for me right now and more convenient to just stick with my newspaper archive subscriptions
Hmm.
and like my magazines and shit and just I mean it's I guess almost in a way kind of like lazy, but like I'm not paying that motherfucking money. My wife will possibly cut my nuts off. So I'm not going to do it. But dude, it's a mess, bro. Like, jokes aside, it's a mess. It's a serious fucking mess. So I'm not that interested in jumping on the bandwagon of following along all this type of shit. If other people want to, that's great because it's going to help keep the sport alive.
Absolutely.
But I'm I'm not out. I'm just kind of like I'm taking like a little break. Let's do history for a bit. You know what I'm saying? Let's do history.
And that's again, that's what I just that's always been my main passion. I mean, when I first started learning about boxing history and I was just like obsessed with it. But because I've been obsessed with history in general. Like you give me a book about certain things that happened way back in time, I'm gonna watch the shit out of it. Like for instance, I
Absolutely.
watched it's actually been on Netflix, I want to say for a number of years now, but there's a documentary on there called Rise of the Samurai, I think it is, or Age of Samurai, some shit like that. And there's like multi episodes of it, and it's talking about Japan back in like the 1600s, I believe, and how just everybody's just fighting for dominance to be, the head honcho over there and shit. And like, bro, what a crazy ass time back then. But I mean, like, I was fascinated by it because it's history. So, back to this, like, it's hard to be a fan the way it was for me as a kid because when I was a kid, I was just obsessed with the sport in general. And even though there was people like us now, how we are now, back then, talking about all the annoyances and everything, and usually you can read them in the back pages of Ring magazine when they let you come into the come out writing section, and everybody would just be venting their frustration about various things. And understandably so. But like as a kid, I was just like excited about the sport because it was new and fresh to me. So I was just taking anything. Oh, Roy Jones, Tony Thornton, I'll watch that. That sounds awesome. Terry Norris beating up another scrub, I'll watch that. That sounds awesome. Like I didn't care. It was just like, exciting to watch these guys, especially if I read about them and now getting to see them live for the first time. But now you and I be involved in the sport, in various ways for well over 30 years now. I mean, it's tough. But uh, that's why we stick to history. And like with today with history, what's the most important? Well, actually, too, because this correlates to what goes on today. What's the most important thing, especially to a popular fighter, is protecting their O, right?
Um,
Well, one of them is.
I mean, for a popular fighter, probably.
I mean, an
Um,
undefeated popular fighter, right? What's the main thing for them is always protecting their O now. That's compared to how it was in the past. If you suffered a loss, it wasn't the end all be all. But
yeah, yeah,
with today, if a guy suffers their first loss, you can just see how it just shatters their world, and everyone talks about, oh my God, they suffered an L, and it's just,
yeah.
you know, because they
Well,
have that Floyd Mayweather mystique.
and I was gonna
But
say, like, you can't put it all on Floyd, but you can put a healthy amount, unfortunately,
yeah,
because, and it's not because of necessarily his accomplishments, because that's obviously part of it. That's a puzzle piece, but
hmm
the other puzzle piece is that how much money he made, and now look at all the fucking morons who followed that model, and look at Floyd now.
yeah,
So, but whatever, fine. Nonetheless, he definitely helped perpetuate that idea that like the undefeated mystique, you need to be undefeated to really call yourself the greatest type of thing. And obviously it's not that he invented the idea that being undefeated is worthwhile or worth something, but still it really did not help. And then also I think you have to attach with the undefeated thing is like the way that they sell fights now and the way that boxing is sold through all of the apps. They're going through the apps and they're selling the
yeah,
subscriptions and all of this fucking shit these days. Yeah, there's so I mean that kind of goes hand in hand. It's like the way that it makes its money now is different, and so that has to go with it. But
yeah.
yeah,
So, but that's
unfortunately.
that's what I was bringing up. So that's like how it correlates to this episode today because we're talking about undefeated records and probably the most, well, besides Floyd's for modern times, but the most talked about undefeated record in boxing history up until the Floyd era, and that's Rocky Marciano. So Marciano wasn't the first person to retire undefeated. Clearly he wasn't the last one as well. And there's other former fighters who, before suffering an L, had bigger streaks than he did. You know what I mean? Like Sugar Ray Robinson or well, did Robinson make it to? Yeah, I think he surpassed. Did he surpass Marciano before the first? I don't think he did. Right?
Well, no, Robinson was before Marciano.
No, no, I know he was, but I'm saying like his record, like what before he suffered his first loss to Lamata. What was it again?
He was like 40s, 40, he was in like the 40s.
Yeah.
He was like
Okay. So
43-1 or something like that. So he didn't quite get
yeah,
there,
yeah,
but
exactly.
who
43-1.
did
Yeah.
was Willie Pep.
That's what I was. That was the other one I was about to bring up, Willie Pep, who went on an incredible run before he lost to Sammy Enga, and then went on another
Yeah,
wild
he was
run
like
after that.
63-0 or 64-0 or
Yeah,
some shit like
Julio
that.
Cesar Chavez, who was what 78-0.
Yeah, like a
Um,
huge asterisk, of course,
of course,
which they've kind of uncovered retroactively, but nonetheless, yeah, he got
and
to
way
89 and
before
0 or
all of
something.
them, all-time great Packy McFarland, maybe the greatest fighter to never win a world title, retired undefeated. Um, a lightweight champion before Packy McFarland, Jack McCuffley, retired undefeated as undefeated lightweight champion. Um, yeah, I mean, and there was a, You know what? There was another fighter too. I know I'm missing a couple, but like there was well Edwin Valero. Didn't quite retire, but you get what happened there. Um,
Forced to retire.
yeah, under various circum. I mean, fuck Valero, but
Scumbag.
like,
Yes, right.
yeah.
Fuck that fucking guy.
Um, and I can't remember his name off the top of my head, but there was a Korean fighter, I believe, and from the 80s who was a champion and retired undefeated. And he used to be mentioned in the ring record, in not the ring record book, but the Ring Almanac. Remember the almanacs from the 90s?
Hmm. Hmm.
Like the paperbacks? That's where I first learned about that because they were like, "Oh, fun fact: Rocky Marciano was the only guy to retire undefeated as champion." Then they mentioned his name, and I forgot, can't remember his name. I'm not gonna try to look it up right now, but like,
I don't remember off the top of my
yeah,
head. It sounds familiar, but I'm not going to lie to you. I don't remember.
yeah.
And I
So
mean, part of the whole mythos of retiring undefeated is, of course, James Jeffries, who retired undefeated, but
and
then
then came back. Yeah,
unretired. So, it doesn't count. But
Terry
nonetheless,
Marsh was
he's,
another one.
yeah, there were a handful of fighters who did that too. But
Yeah,
still,
you remember Terry Marsh, the junior
mhm,
welterweight champion from
mhm,
the 80s? I think he had to retire because of epilepsy or something like that,
yeah,
but he was undefeated as well. That was a handful. But getting through all that, Marciano has always been the gold standard of everyone, 49 and 0, and people trying to chase that record. And even years after he passed away in a tragic plane accident, the controversy coming up, not with his record, but people trying to chase it and, the shit that would happen while trying to get to that record at heavyweight. I mean, it's really,
yeah,
hilarious in more ways than one. But yeah, we're focusing our time today on Marciano, um, his undefeated record, and I mean, I guess how people really place him in history because, like, when it comes down to it, I understand he stays in like mythical standards even till this day with a lot of people just because of the popularity he had when he was champion, and then like that popularity, like passing down through each generation of families, especially in the New England area, you know what I mean, where he's still on godly status. It's one of those subjects. Yes, I mean, it's a broad subject that a lot of people have talked about, but it's one that we really haven't delved in on. So here we are.
yep. Yeah, and as far as what we get into today, to paraphrase Larry Holmes, if I hurt your feelings, so fucking what?
Did Holmes really curse that much? He always like said stuff like,
No, not all the
I mean, not
time.
in
He
public.
was
I mean,
he was
when during
pissed.
interviews on in print, he was always cursing, but like,
Well, I'll say this, and I mean, we might revisit this at some point, but I'll say this. I think that this also had a lot to do, kind of like Bob Foster. Larry
yeah.
Holmes had a legit bone to pick with a lot of people during his career. Like he didn't get respected in a lot of ways. Like he didn't get the same treatment that a lot of other fighters got, and having to fight in the shadow of somebody like Muhammad Ali must have fucking sucked.
Mhm.
But so I mean, like, I think that he kind of like had a legit gripe for a lot of the shit that he was going on about. And then with the first Spinks fight was pretty close. He battled hard, didn't quite get it. You know what I mean? That was, in my opinion, that like it was close. I think Spanx won it, but it was pretty close. The second fight, Holmes probably should have won. But regardless, it was close enough that a champion losing their fucking title is probably going to be pissed off and be like, "Fuck that! I should have lost my title." But then on top of that, according to him, he paid for Peter Marciano, Rocky's brother, to come out and do all sorts of publicity for the fight, because basically they had invoked Rocky's name during the promotion, and the family had gotten pissed off about it. And I think if I'm not mistaken, it was like Larry wanted to like kind of like extend an olive branch of peace and kind of like be cool about it type of thing. But then the entire week, according to him, his family spent the week like trashing Larry Holmes and talking shit to the press and stuff like that. And so by the time like it was like got to the post fight press conference, he just lost. And then on top of that, he saw in the back of the room, he could see Peter Marciano giving an interview with somebody. And so Peter Marciano started jawing at him from the side. And he basically was just like, fuck you. Like, fuck you. Like, this is my moment. And you distracted from my moment the entire fucking week. And, you fucked with me. And like, and I tried to be nice. So fuck you guys now. And the only part anybody ever remembers is him going, fuck you. So he's the bad guy. So I'm not saying that I fully agree with everything Larry Holmes ever did or had to say, but in this specific instance, I kind of feel like he had a little bit of a legit gripe. And that being said, even just me saying that's probably going to piss off some Marciano fans. I truly don't give a fuck, but that's how it goes. Some people, and there are probably, I'll just say this before we really get into the Marciano shit. Some people who watch or listen probably are aware that I run the boxing history, the actual boxing history accounts on like Facebook and Instagram and shit like that. So some people might actually know, some people might not, but if they didn't, now they know. And every single time that I post shit about Rocky Marciano that gets any sort of attention, I'm not saying that I'm like the fucking social media guru when it comes to boxing history. I'm simply stating that I've seen a lot. I've interacted with a lot of fucking people. The vast majority of them total idiots. And every single time I post a Rocky Marciano thing, anything, whatever it is, doesn't matter. If it gets any sort of substantial amount of attention, the absolute fucking idiots come out of the woodwork every single time. And I'm not even like anti Rocky Marciano. It's just that they're so overwhelmingly stupid that it makes me mad about it. Not even mad, just like aggravated, but still. So that might come out a little bit, and some of the shit that I say won't speak for you, but we'll get into that.
I mean, for me, I understand like growing up in Massachusetts, especially not far at all from Brockton, the loyalty New Englanders have to one of their own, especially like a homegrown talent that was just like adored by everybody and then rises to the heights that they do.
Right.
Like,
If somebody's confused, think about like the Patriots or the Celtics or something like that, and
mhm.
like the blind devotion to these kinds of sports teams,
Yeah,
and then transfer that to Rocky Marciano. Same shit.
exactly. Just one person and not even just like, Boston's
And
huge.
and the
That's like,
racism too, and the fucking racism too.
you're not lying. I grew up around there.
Just saying. But
Not as
yeah.
bad as Boston, but like it's very prevalent. But anyways, like you go there and Brockton, like New Bedford, which we're like 40 minutes out of the way or whatever it may be, is as a decent sized city by New England standards, but I mean obviously like dwarfed by anything massive like New York, even Boston, for example, because Boston is like a miniature New York. That being said, everybody was Marciano was one, like I said, just a homegrown guy that like came from humble beginnings like everyone else over like growing up in the 50s in Massachusetts, not growing up in the 50s, like yeah, young people growing up in the 50s, excuse me, I'm fucking tongue tied over here, and people from that era just growing up, they could relate to The Rock, you know what I mean? His parents and what they did. I think his father was a shoemaker or some shit, right? Or
Yeah, he's like a cobbler or some
yeah, he
sort of
worked in the
something.
factory. Yeah, he did some, some kind of factory work. And then his mom,
Yeah, he's came
you
from a
see all
working
the,
class family.
exactly. You see the mom being home, always making pasta, doing all type of shit. Everyone can relate to them. And then the fact of how he rose through the ranks over the years, very exciting fighter, the wars he put on, and then just retiring undefeated. Yeah, I mean, where else are you gonna get like coming from Brockton? Like, imagine if that was in New Bedford, we'd be the same way. You know what I mean? It's just one of those, oh my God, this was our guy. This is someone we're proud of. This was our claim to fame. Not only that, Brockton got Marvin Hagler by default, 20 something years later after Marciano's reign. So there you go. You know what I mean? Like they had two all-time greats over in their town, and they're very, very loyal and fiercely protective of both of them. More so of Marciano too. I mean, yes, the fact that Marciano has died close to 60 years now, is in the he passed away over close to 60 years now in that tragic plane crash.
Yeah.
But it's the loyalty that Brockton still has toward him is like absolutely insane. Like, like I said, you go out there and you talk to even like, younger people, they'll of course are gonna know who Rocky Marciano is and give you a whole like thing. I bet you they taught about him in public school. over there. You know what I mean? And then the schools over there. In fact, I guarantee you they did because that's how important he's considered. Hagler too, but like Hagler came from Newark and then just ingrained himself in Brockton and never left. So obviously they took him as his own son, and that amazing statue that they have attests to that, and yada yada yada. But like that's why there's so many like crazy Marciano fans, and of course they filter out throughout the world and country and stuff like that. But the homegrown ones in Brockton, you can't like New England fans are very loyal to their people, bro. Like it's kind of it's different out there.
Yeah, absolutely. And, there's I think a lot of, some might say dog whistles, but there are a lot of qualities about Rocky Marciano and his upbringing and where he lived and whatnot that definitely meet that kind of like all American sort of criteria. He grew up in a part of the country where like if you look at like there are photos of him like from his childhood and like
Hmm.
playing baseball and stuff like that. It looks like a gaggle of kids from like the Sandlot. That's
Yeah.
that's identical. It looks exactly like that kind of suburban, safe. And he played baseball. That was his first love. Always wanted to play baseball, joined the army, served in the army. So, I mean, I think that there were a lot of things about him and his family, like you mentioned earlier, a working class family that were just relatable to a lot
Yeah.
of people. And if not relatable and not immediately relatable, easily sellable. And so when he rose through the ranks, when you combine those qualities with the fact that he was a fighter that's like, he's easy to root for, regardless of how you feel about him or his fans. He's the type of fighter who you knew he was going to give
Hmm.
everything he had, every ounce of energy that he had, he was going to put into his punches. Like he wasn't going to leave a whole lot in the ring. If it was the 10th round and he needed that one final round. He's down 9 rounds and needed that knockout. He was going to go for it. And there's
Yeah.
something to say for that kind of fighter because you can't even count how many times you've watched a fight where you're thinking, this is it. This person needs to go for it. And they just don't. They just don't. And so to have a fighter where that's going to happen every time, there's a lot to say for that shit. And so that's the kind of quality that puts him in a lot of the, I'm sure we'll talk about mythical matchups in a little bit, that keeps him in any of these mythical matchups or keeps him, even though we might not pick him in some of them, he's at least in the conversation, and that's why.
Yeah.
His heart and his toughness and his punching power. And when you put those kinds of fighters in the ring, they're fun to watch. They're fun to root for. They're also because of those things relatable.
Yeah, and like for instance, for me, like the first time I ever started learning, first time I started learning about Marciano was through, first time I ever heard of him was through Greatest Heavyweights. This was even before I was a real boxer fan. Greatest Heavyweights for Sega Genesis. Great game. We've discussed it I believe on the video game show that we talked about with Boxer at Gray way
Hmm.
back in the day.
Yep.
And Marciano was on that game. And the two guys that I always struggled with in that fucking game, for whatever reason, was Larry Holmes. And ask Corey Ortman about that. He'll talk about how Larry Holmes just keeps you away with a stupid jab the whole time and you can't get inside him until you learn how to do it. And Marciano. And I don't know what it is, but they made Marciano to be an absolute juggernaut who you can hit him with whatever. He just walks through it and just wails on your body until you just. And they had this little screen where they showed you the damage was being done and all that. And then your whole body is just like dark red while your head is still kind of clear because he just beat you like a drum down there. And there's nothing you can do about it until round 8 when you just collapse and die because like you have no energy from his body punches. So that's what I learned about him initially. And then after that, I as I'm becoming a boxing fan, the first was how I was learning about Joe Louis as well. I watched the movie The Joe Louis Story, starring Coley Wallace, a heavyweight who coincidentally beat Marciano in the amateurs and became that trivia question. Oh, so who did Marciano lose to? And everyone says Coley Wallace. I mean, yes, he lost to Wallace, but he also lost other fights as an amateur as well, right? Like he wasn't just one done at that one. So um but I always enjoy the Joe Louis movie as a kid. Like I'd said, I like old shit and the music behind it. Everybody back then played their parts really well. Coley Wallace looked just like Joe Louis. Maybe not the same body type. He was a little bit flabbier, but I mean, like, he played his part really well. The guy who played Jack Blackburn, until I learned more about Blackburn and saw the jagged scar across his face and everything like that, he played a great part as well. I mean, you can get the disciplinary part. They had Manny Seaman playing a part. Old Sam Langford, that's the first time I ever heard of him coming in. Like, I love that movie. But what got me mad about it was because I'm getting all entranced in loving Joe Louis, and then I see him get absolutely flattened at the end of it by Marciano because they were showing real fight clips. I was like, what the fuck, man? Like, immediately, I'm like, I don't like this Marciano. He's beat up my buddy that I've been watching for an hour and a half and got like, really ingrained in his life. And then you just see Marciano just walking up and boom, and you see Lewis just splayed out, and I'm just like, oh man, but and then you start reading more about him. I realize, oh shit, he's from Brockton, everything like that, and everything that you said too. It's easy to root for him, and the fact that he was able to make it that far was absolutely incredible too, because like when he started, he had nothing going for him. Like he was just a strong brute that no footwork, no. And I mean, if you watch the Rocky films, you can it's loosely based on how Marciano probably looked when in the first film too. Like just like Marciano, you have no footwork, blah blah blah. Like tying the shoelaces between his legs and stuff like that to try to show him how to get balance and all this shit. So Marciano at least had a trainer back then, like a lot of dudes did. Like there was always just legit trainers. The majority of them were legit back in the 40s, 30s, 50s, and so on and so forth. And a lot of them were former fighters that just were passing on the knowledge that they knew from back then. And Marciano had that, and a guy named Charlie Goldman.
Absolutely. And there's no question too that Mick
Yeah,
from Mick Gold wasn't Goldberg, Mick Goldman, Mick Gold.
uh, Goldman. Wait, yeah, it was
Yeah, didn't
Goldman,
they
Mickey
even
Gold.
yeah, they even named him Goldman. There's absolutely no fucking question that he
Yeah,
was.
that was in the third movie. That's when you found out like they when he was getting that's when you found his last name and when he was getting buried. Remember
Yeah,
in
yeah,
the
at his
yeah,
grave.
at
Yeah,
his
yeah,
grave,
that's why it
yeah.
took me a second. Yeah, it was gold. Yeah. So they even gave him his name, and he was clearly modeled after,
Yes,
even
yeah.
though he didn't quite look the same, clearly modeled after old Charlie, who himself was a fighter. And then on top of that was known for he'd always dressed in a big coat, a big long coat.
Hmm.
He had that bowling
The
kind of
bowling
a
hat.
bowler kind of cap, big glasses, and then carried a bag that was a doctor bag and it said Doctor CG, even though he was not a doctor, but somebody
Of
had given
course.
him this bag, and it was filled with all sorts of like liquids and fucking magical potions. People don't understand, okay? Like we've gone over this on some other shows, but this shit always trips me out when I see photos of the actual contents of these bags, which is like, what the fuck is that? Like you're just looking at this shit and it looks like a fucking witch's purse or something, dude. Like there's like Eye of Newt in this motherfucker and there's fucking bat dick over here. It's fucking crazy, dude. There's like little eye droppers and shit.
Hmm.
And the point is, like, there's all sorts of liquids that they themselves put together. They're not chemists, they're not pharmacologists, they're just fucking cut men and fucking trainers.
I mean,
But
I told you, bro, the one time, well, Freddie
crazy.
Brown, who I believe was in Marciano's corner as well.
Another
Um,
guy from just a couple of years off of that. Yeah.
yeah, so Freddie Brown, when I believe I've told this story before, but if not for new listeners, when Hank Kaplan had his collection, the late great historian and owner of the biggest collection of boxing. I won't say just memorabilia, close to, I mean, but just
Yeah,
everything.
you said it
Just
was just like bankers boxes and bankers
I have
boxes
never
and
seen
bankers
anything like
boxes
that
and
in my
shit.
life. And it was the most incredible, just like he had just the entire history from the 1800s up until his passing right there. Everything you can imagine, every fighter of like note, all this stuff didn't matter. Like famous artifacts, newspaper clippings, whatever. Like it was incredible. That being said, um, as I was working and like, archiving a lot of that stuff over there, I remember there at one point someone showed up with like a bunch of duffel bags and garbage bags and shit, and they just dropped it and they were like, well, you have this collection. Would you be interested in this? And they were like, yeah, what is it? And they were like, oh yeah, this is Freddie Brown stuff. And they just wanted to get rid of it. And so Freddie Brown's collection ended up at Brooklyn College as well. And I remember going through that. And I opened up one of those doctor bags, and the shit I saw in there, I should have like I mean, it's been so long, I don't remember the exact contents, but there was some liquid still in some of those vials that he had, bro. And like the different things. I was, more entranced by his training jackets. I even tried on one of the Duran wool cardigans that he had. He had the Marciano ones, he had other ones like that, but like there was a whole leather bag or and another bag that was just filled with all kinds of condiments and old mouthpieces and other things like that. Like,
Just think of how many times you've watched in a boxing movie or show or whatever, and they've been just like, like holding up the thing to their nose and the fighter,
mhm.
smelling salts or whatever. Like that's just illegal. Like you can't even use that, and you haven't been able to use that for decades in boxing. But that's just so crazy to me that they would just let them like bring in whatever the fuck. Like who knows what it was, what I mean? Crazy. But that's also kind of just a glimpse into the world of this time. Charlie Goldman was there were so many qualities about Charlie Goldman that were like almost stereotypical crusty boxing trainer qualities. They said that he always used to blurt out one-liners and have these kind of like cliche type things that he would throw out. And only reason why I know all of this shit is because I researched a lot of it for the Bonavena book because he came back and trained Bonavena. But he used to say one of the things that he used to say, for instance, if I remember correctly, he would say training fighters is like uh, putting a dime into one pocket and taking a quarter out of another, meaning that like it was always like it was sucking the life out of you, like he'd fuck you up. And you'd say like you never buy shit off the street, including diamonds or something like like he'd always like have these crazy fucking sayings that would be like, yeah, no shit, like type of stuff. But he would always blurt these things out. And then another thing he was known for was he was always bringing around young, like almost kind of like obscenely young ladies that he would have with him, and he would refer to them as his nieces. And so, yeah, like what? That's so fucking weird. And so, like everybody who was in the boxing community, because he was in the New York boxing community usually, and he trained out of Stillman's gym, which
Mhm.
itself was an historic gym in I can't remember where in New York. You'd probably know, but it was in New York City, and so there were a handful of like tenement houses, motels and restaurant type places that have apartments above them around where Stillman's gym was. And around this place, it was almost like a fucking like Paris where they would have like fucking philosophers and shit,
Yeah,
except
yeah,
for
yeah.
instead of that, they'd have a fucking boxing gym. And around the boxing gym would be these crusty ass boxing trainers where they'd live and rent out rooms and apartments and shit like that. And that's where Charlie Goldman lived for a long time. There were a handful of other well-known trainers also who trained out of Stillman's who also did the exact same thing. And so, long story short, where this links back up to Rocky Marciano here is
Mhm.
that early in Rocky Marciano's career, basically, you look at a fighter like that come into the gym and you can't help but see the raw power. You can't help but see like, oh, like damn, this fool's wailing on the bag. Like Jesus Christ. Like, you can hear it throughout the gym. You hear the frack, frack, and you're just like looking over like, what the fuck is that? You know what I mean? That's the type of shit that gets people's attention. But if you're like a boxing trainer who's well schooled at all, then you see the dude and you see his footwork and you're like, hey, oh, Jesus, dude. All right. Does anybody know, like kind of like in fucking Rocky, like, does anybody know, like, get this guy like an enforcer or something? Like, get this guy a job with the fucking mob. This guy sucks. So that's kind of what he looked like in the gym. And there were other trainers, supposedly, as the kind of story goes, that were brought in to take a look at Marciano and were like, Passerowski, buddy. Supposedly, Angelo Dundee was one of those guys that came and looked at Rocky Marciano and said, Yeah, it's a big pass for me. I'm gonna say no. And then they brought in Charlie Goldman, and Charlie Goldman said that he looked at Rocky Marciano's hands, which were looked like ham hocks to him, and that he was just like, "Yeah, I'm gonna do something with this guy," and he took him into the gym. And he basically, there's actually in Life magazine, there's a really great story on Stillman's in the early 1950s and Rocky Marciano's early time with Charlie Goldman is covered in this article. And there's a whole bunch of photos of Charlie Goldman in the ring with Rocky Marciano. And that was another thing about Charlie Goldman was that he always said that he would never try to train a fighter to do something that he couldn't get into the ring and do with them. So he would always jump up into the ring and be like, "Oh, okay, no, you can't do that shit. Do this," and then show them himself or spar with them at like fucking like, 65 years old, little gnome looking guy. So nonetheless, that's kind of where it all started and how it links back to Rocky Marciano.
Yeah, and it was obviously his career took off pretty quickly, and he was fighting on the circuit and fighting very well-known guys, and including one of my old trainers actually fought on one of his early undercards, and he loved to brag about that. My old trainer, who's passed away years ago, his name was Caesar Duarte, and he talked about it. It was like, oh yeah, man, I remember meeting The Rock. He was like, I fought on his undercard, and blah blah blah. And I'm like, word, and he was like, and I looked it up, and he actually did, and. Well, then, like Marciano was doing his thing, but there was also hiccups there back then too. Yes, he was knocking out a lot of guys, but he ends up running into a wily veteran earlier in his career by the name of Tiger Ted Lowry. And Lowry is a guy that I've always been fascinated with. One, because he was from New Bedford. Like spent many years over there, lived there for a long time until I think he eventually ended up in Connecticut in his later years. But he was a New Bedford native. And Lowry was one of those guys that like he didn't have the best record, but he literally fought everybody that was around during his era. Like there wasn't one person that he didn't fight back then. You know what I mean? Like just look at if you look at his record and you see like we fought up and down, there's not many people missed. You know what I mean? From Marciano to Archie Moore to I believe fought Jimmy Bivens and every other contender, Joey Maxim, all these other guys, Hall of Famers up and down. And 99% of the time went the distance. He was only stopped a few times, and it wasn't by Marciano. And anyways, this is the fight that a lot of people always bring up early in his career because when people say, well, maybe he shouldn't be 49-0 because by all accounts, Tiger Ted Lowry beat the bejesus out of him that night.
Well, in the I actually we kind of skipped over one thing, although you
Oh,
mentioned him,
please.
Coley Wallace, because he did lose to Coley Wallace in the amateurs,
Hmm.
and I guess the you know
That's what I,
the
yeah, yeah, we talked. Go ahead.
well the I guess the controversy. I mean, I think that it's kind of been more in recent years, more as people have become more aware of boxing records and have better access to newspapers and shit like that. That in recent years, there's been a slight controversy because people said, well, technically, Rocky Marciano fought pro fights uh,
That's right.
before that Coley Wallace lost. So, technically speaking, that should probably count as a pro loss. Therefore, Rocky Marciano is not undefeated, but I don't think anybody really abides by that. So, but anyway, I'm just simply stating that that has been brought up numerous times by numerous people as an argument for why he wouldn't be undefeated. But going back to, his pro career too, there were a handful of instances in the pros where many people thought that he came super close to losing or should have lost. And this is that first instance against Tiger Ted Lowry in 1949.
Yeah, Lowry was a wily veteran. I mean, especially against Marciano, who was still developing. And you can imagine he wasn't the most aesthetic looking dude when he was in his absolute prime as heavyweight champion. So imagine during his early years how awkward and gorky he was, and Charlie Goldman just still molding his product. And by the time he fought him for the first time, excuse me, when he fought him for the first time, it was what was his record the first already? It was hold up, I'm bringing it up right now. Dun, dun,
Excuse
dun,
me.
dun.
Lowry's record,
Yeah,
67, 49, and 9.
I mean, tells you right there.
Yeah. So, I mean, you would describe that record as experienced.
Exactly. That's, a guy that had seen every, like he had already seen everything at that point. It was nothing that he was going to see that was going to like bother him or really like get him out of the loop or whatever, and yeah, I wish there was footage of that fight, but on all accounts, Marciano was befuddled and Lowry was able to beat him. But I mean, they ended up fighting a rematch a little bit later on, and Marciano legitimately beat him in that one. And Lowry even said too that Marciano had, vastly improved from their first fight, and he was like, he's going to go on to do great things. But to his credit, Lowry remained the only person in history to go the distance with Marciano twice. And then you fast forward again, um, starting in 1950. Well, before that, in 1949, Marciano had his first touch of tragedy, so to speak, because he fought a guy by the name of Carmine Vingo, who was another prospect along with him. He was 16-1, but Marciano knocked him out and put him in a coma.
Mhm.
I mean,
Yeah.
I've seen that been talked about in documentaries. I believe they touched on it in that. Did they touch on it in that Marciano movie that was on Showtime? They might have. I don't know.
I'm not sure.
I've not
Yeah, I don't
watched
know.
it since it aired back in like I don't know what was that 2000 or so, um but yeah, he knocks out Carmine Vingo, puts him in the hospital. Vingo career obviously ended, but did he eventually recover?
Yeah, he eventually, I guess, as far as I know, recovered and never, had any sort of issue, beyond the recovery.
Yeah.
But I mean, he died in like the 2010s or something like that. So I
Oh,
mean,
so
he was alive for a long ass time.
for sure. But his first fight in 1950 was another super close call, another one that you can consider, well, that should be maybe a loss on his record, and other people might disagree or whatever, but he fought another, so I would call that a prospect. I mean, another top contender. This was a battle of top contenders at
Absolutely.
MSG, a big one too. Roland Lastarza. Roland Lastarza, the opposite of Marciano, who was, a crudish and, a slugger and stuff like that. Lastarza was stylistic. Lastarza could box. He was a very, very stylish guy. And he's 37-0. And, he had built his record up not against cupcakes either. He fought very, formidable opposition up to this point. And when they ended up fighting, like it was one of those incredibly. I'm the first time I read about their first fight because I didn't know a fuck ton about Roland Lastarza coming up. Like I knew that, um, unfortunately for him, I mean, the first time I ever heard about him was on that 30 great one punch knockouts video when he was the victim of, I mean, he was the guy that was getting, yeah, he was the victim of a fucking vicious knockout by a Cuban, I guess I'll call him a journeyman. He wasn't a contender so much, Julio Medeiros, who like never gets brought up. And if he does, it's about that fight with Harold Johnson and Johnson talking about getting poisoned by an orange before the fight before
Hmm.
Medeiros knocked him out. But Medeiros, again, that guy had a very spotty record, but he fought a lot of good contenders around then. Knocked the shit out of Lastarza. He hit him with a fucking pow, and Lastarza just crumbled like absolute nothing. But at 1950, my voice is losing again. Let me drink a sip of water here. Excuse me. He was 37-0, and it was an extremely, extremely close fight. Like they talked about it in KO magazine about heavyweight fights that demanded rematches because they were referencing Riddick Bowe, Andrew Galata.
Hmm.
Obviously, that demanded a rematch. And then they mentioned the first Marciano Lastarza fight, and they talked about just how close it was that Lastarza outboxed him for pockets, and Marciano, of course, rallied back, and it was right down to the wire. But Marciano ended up winning the closest of decisions. And after the fight ended, Lastarza's manager came in screaming in the dressing room, throwing an absolute tantrum, talking about how they were screwed and the fix was in and all this other bullshit. And it just basically demanded a rematch, which would take place, a few years after that. But that was another one of those fights that you can say to yourself, well, Marciano was really lucky to get the decision that night.
Yeah, and I mean, and I think that it's probably overlooked in the sense that Roland Lastarza was pegged as like the next potential champion
Yeah.
earlier in his career. He got a lot of media attention. He was a good-looking guy. So he fit that idea pretty well, and he, like you said, was undefeated himself. had fought a number of good contenders, and the dude that he defeated to get that shot at Rocky Marciano at Madison Square Garden was an Argentine dude named Cesar Brion, who himself was just like a tough as nails fighter who, he had losses, but I think he had only like one or two knockout losses of like maybe a dozen losses
Fought
total.
Joe Lewis a couple of times. Fought Joe
Yeah,
Lewis in his
just a
comeback. Yeah.
absolute, and I mean, not that's obviously not the best version of Joe Lewis, needless to say, but the dude could absolutely still hit, and Cesar Brion was just tough as nails, dude, and Roland Listarza earned a really difficult win over him to get that Marciano fight, whereas
Hmm.
a lot of people even then were kind of like, the people had eyes and they could see that Marciano was not super skilled. And there were various instances, in their opinion, where Marciano was just like not looking exactly impressive. So in any case, I think that a lot of people saw this kind of fight and then Marciano's struggles and then went, I don't
Oh
know,
yeah.
not exactly convinced.
No, but I mean, he still had impressive performances coming up soon after that. Like, another top contender was Rex Lane, which was another um featured on the 30 Great One Punch Knockout video. Lane had fought a who's who of everybody. Wouldn't say that he was like people were saying he was going to be the next champion, but he was definitely a top contender. He had beaten Jersey Joe Walcott and, a lot of others that was in the mix, but Marciano brutalized him with a vicious knockout. What was it? In round six, he hit him with a right hand, and Lane just kind of like fell in folds, just really slow and didn't move. Um, by the time he fights in 1952, Harry Kid Matthews, and this is the elimination fight to see who's going to fight Joe Lewis, excuse me, Jersey Joe Walcott, because we already mentioned Joe Lewis at this point had come back and Marciano had knocked him
He
out,
was 76
and
years old.
yeah, exactly, right? You know what I mean? Joe Lewis, 76 years old when I fought when I met him, blah blah blah. And he was like, and then what did he say at the end of it? Who did he say that walked into the place?
No, he said that he was walking and that he
No, no,
turned.
no, no, no. He said someone came and sat in the chair, and he was like, "Yo, man, you're friends with Joe Lewis. How old is Joe Lewis?"
Oh,
And
Frank Sinatra or some
yeah,
shit.
that's what. Yeah, he was like, "Frank Sinatra sat in this chair." I was like, "Frank, you friend with Joe Lewis? How old is Joe Lewis?" He was like, "Yo, Joe, 137 years old. 137 years." He was like, "Man, you never make no Frank Sinatra. Fuck you, and fuck you. Who's next?"
Absolutely, like just that literally, there's like 90 seconds total of boxing conversation in that movie, and
Yeah.
there's like 1,000 years worth of comedy in just that 90 seconds because it's all 100% true.
And then he was like, and then when they mentioned
Rocky
Muhammad
Marciano,
Ali,
Rocky
yeah.
Marciano.
That's they one. That's they one. Every time they gotta bring a Rocky Marciano. Arsenio too. Like he doesn't really say much, but you see him. He throws his hands up too, just like like nodding along.
Beat Joe Lewis's ass.
That's right. He did kick Joe Lewis's ass. Joe Lewis, 75 years old when they fought. But, oh
Fucking
my
great.
god, man! And then when they go back down again, and he was like, he better than Sugar Ray. He better than Sugar
Who's that?
Ray.
Who's
Better
that
than
motherfucker
Cash.
look like a bulldog?
Yeah, Mike
Mike
Tyson.
Tyson.
He better than him too. I don't understand why I got you. He said, "Mama name him Clay. I'm gonna call him Clay." um, but by the time he fights Harry Kid Matthews, and Harry Kid Matthews was another top contender at that time who had a
hmm
very
hmm
inflated record. And I mean, dude was 81-3 with five draws, which is absolutely insane. Well, not really for that era because people were racking up numbers like that. But I mean, when you think about it today, that's multiple careers. And he was managed
Yeah,
by,
how
I
many
want to say,
Shakur Stevensons is that?
yeah, about 15. um, when I believe he was managed by what was it, Jack Hurley, who used to manage Billy Patrol, the lightweight great who never won a title. Might be wrong. I know his first name was Jack, but like Matthews was
Yeah,
extremely.
Jack Hurley. Yeah,
That was Jack Hurley. Okay.
yeah.
Matthews was like extremely like high profile, and people had big ideas thinking he could be the potential champ. And Marciano scored one of the more scary knockouts of his career when he knocked out Matthews in the second round. And the reason why I say that is because it's a left hook I think he hits him with. And you see Matthews' head bounce off the fucking bottom turnbuckle. It just lands there like, and there's been fighters who have died because of that. You know what I mean? Like think of like Davey Moore, who's like the his neck bouncing off the bottom rope and severing his brainstem, I think, essentially when he, unfortunately passed away against Sugar Ramos, for example. And there's been other examples of fighters too, when they like get a hurt, something happens with their neck or whatever, hit something and they get seriously injured. So I mean, watching Matthews and you see his head just like lay there while his body is like straight and his head is just, on that bottom turnbuckle is something gnarly. So yeah, soon after that he fights Walcott. We don't really need to like hash over that fight
There
because
was
obviously everybody's seen it. And
there was that famous photo of the pre-fight photo of Walcott with the crown
the
on,
crown
and then Harry Matthews on one side and
and
Marciano on the
Marciano on the
other.
other. Yep, that's
And
in the
but
Ring
I mean
Magazine
that
time
was
capsule.
well, and a lot of people considered that a serious like 50-50 fight, and many picked Matthews because they just thought Marciano's not skilled enough, way too crude. And so and I mean if you watch like the first, I would say probably more like the middle portion of that first Walcott fight too. That's kind of how it played out. Dude did not seem like he was on his way.
No, I mean not at all. And I was watching it last night trying to gather stuff again for this because I hadn't watched it in a while. And like Walcott, who we've always talked about on the show as being the most awkward guy ever to fight, and he absolutely was. It must have been a fucking nightmare fighting that dude. I just would have jumped out the ring and said, "Screw this," before I got knocked out by a check lift hook. But um, he was getting amateurish. Is that even a word? Amateurish?
Yeah.
Okay. You know what? The only reason why I say this is because there was one time on a broadcast, I still remember reading about this, that Myron Hagler said amateurish. He's looking amateurish. And the guy was like, "Do you mean amateurish?" And he goes, "Amateurish." And then he just left it at that because why are you going to argue with Hagler?
Like, you win.
Yeah. But yeah, Walcott was looking amateurish during the. That's such a fucking tongue twister, amateurish. During the fight, at some point, squaring up completely Marciano and just winging bombs because he thought he was going to take him out quickly, especially when he knocked him down in the first round. Like, he was like, "All right, this is easy work." He called Marciano an amateur before the fight, and then, well, ended up going on until he got absolutely bludgeoned in the 13th. But that's when, the era begins of him as champion, which aside from his few things, it's been covered ad nauseum all over in every book and every magazine and everything like that. But like, to consider he beats Walcott again in a rematch with a first round knockout that may or may not have been whatever. I don't know. I think Walcott was just washed and out of it, and he looked dry before he got in the ring. So
Yeah, he got clipped. Like I mean,
yeah,
like the it was that shit was legit. Like the punch obviously hit him, and it just seemed like one of those instances where like his circuits got fucking scrambled just enough so that like he hops up at like 10 and he's just like, "What? I made it. I was there. What are you talking about? You didn't count, And there's all sorts of fucking,
hmm
excuses and shit where it was just like, "Bro, yeah, you got clobbered." I mean,
straight
I don't
up.
know. You got clobbered in the first round. It happens. I mean, I don't know. You didn't get
And
fucking knocked out clean like in the first fight where you got fucking like died for about 30
oh,
seconds.
jeez.
Like, I mean, but
And that's a
you
legit
got
photo.
banged.
I mean, that was a legit photo from their first fight with like Walcott's face being distorted from that punch
Yeah,
and
like
like his tongue almost coming out of him and everything
there's
just
a
kind of
few
like,
photos that are like his face getting distorted from the same fight, but not the knockout photo. But
yeah.
there is one photo of, and I mean, it's one of the more famous ones of him, and you could see him right up against the ropes, and he's eating that knockout. Jesus Christ,
And
dude.
then Marciano hits him with
Filthy
like,
pot.
the walk away left hook too, just to make
Which,
sure. Make sure you're
yeah,
down.
I mean, I don't really necessarily consider that one dirty. He did all sorts of other shit that was dirty. That was just him
I
going
mean,
like
there's many photos of him just straight up elbowing the shit out of someone's face too, like whatever.
he
But
was he was not a nice fighter.
the only thing I'll talk about the rematch is that if you read Freddie Pacheco's book, about the greatest rounds in boxing history, he considers Marciano Walcott. I forgot which round he put it in. He puts a lot of his favorites in there, obviously. You know what I mean? Instead of actually considering the greatest round, like he mentions Hagler Hearns, obviously, and a couple of others, but like he just a lot of it is like his favorites and people, he always loved and adored, and Marciano was one of them. And so he mentions in the book that he was in the service at that time, or during the at the time for the rematch, and whatever, they obviously didn't have a lot of free time to do whatever the fuck they want. So Pacheco and his group ended up winning some kind of tournament or whatever the fuck they were doing in the army, and they got a chance to have their own like free time for like 2 hours or something like that. Or not even 2 hours, just what they were gonna get their own free time for an activity of what they were gonna be able to do. And so at that point, Pacheco told his boys, they were like, yo, he was like, let's watch the Marciano Walcott rematch. He was like, their first fight went 13 rounds. He was like, guarantee you that's gonna give us like a good hour and a half of just like free time. We can get cigarettes, we can get candy, we can do shit like this, and we're just gonna sit back and watch because it's guaranteed to go like a whole fucking time. And so they convinces the other guys. They're like, "Oh yeah, that sounds good. I guess we'll do that." So that's what they choose as their activity. And of course, the fight ends in the first round. And then the sergeant comes in. He was like, "Party time over! Clean this shit up! Get out!" Like immediately. And everyone wanted to beat Pacheco's ass for like the rest of the time. They're like, "Yo, what the fuck? You said this was gonna be a long time, and it's ended that quickly." But yeah. So he beats Walcott in a rematch, beats Roland Lastarza in a rematch. And that one's vicious too because Lastarza again does well early on, but then Marciano starts beating the absolute shit out of his
Yeah, he
arms.
just beat the hell out of him.
Yeah, to the point where hematomas started growing out of fucking Lastarza's arms from the pounding he was taking from that. That's awful. I can't even imagine how that must have felt. And then he gets stopped.
And
But then
and
that
he
brings
and he
us, of course.
brutalized him too. Like that was one of the that was sorry to interrupt you, but that
No,
was
by all means.
that along with another one we'll get to in a moment are considered one of his worst fights as far as like committing fouls.
Oh, absolutely. And that's what I was gonna say, because that brings us now to I'm gonna let you take this really, really quick to a guy who before Joe Walcott was heavyweight champion, was a dominant man around, one of the greatest fighters of all time, and one of my all-time favorites, Ezra Charles, who is still in the mix and now wanted his piece of the pie to become the first two-time heavyweight champion.
When you look at his resume, Ezer Charles, that is at light heavyweight, he's already an underrated heavyweight champion. I think most people would probably agree with that. But then when you look at his actual resume at light heavyweight, it's like incredible. Like, it's the type of resume that it's rivaling some of the all timers. And so Ezer Charles moves up to, he actually began at middleweight, but moved through or light heavyweight and then moves up to heavyweight. And in the absence of Joe Lewis, long story short, Joe Lewis is convinced to give up the heavyweight title and kind of give up control of the heavyweight title to the International Boxing Club of New York for a fee, of course. And Ezer Charles ends up defeating Jersey Joe Walcott for the claim to the heavyweight throne and winds up defending it a number of times. I want to say it's like what 7 or 8 or something like that. And in any case, he winds up getting knocked out quite brutally by Jersey Joe Walcott and has to stage a comeback from that himself and kind of work his way back to the heavyweight title or a shot at the heavyweight title. But at that point, it wasn't like he was super washed, so it wasn't a difficult sell getting Ezra Charles back to the heavyweight title. That is, and so he fought his way back to a shot at Rocky Marciano, and that was actually one of the fights that I remember seeing on ESPN Classic when I was fairly young. And one of the fights that really got me into boxing, even though they showed a version that was like maybe what, like 9 rounds out of 15 or something like that. It's not the
I
full
don't think
version.
it's a complete fight. I don't think
No,
Marciano Charles won. There's no complete version of that.
yeah,
As far,
it was like whatever they had, they showed, and I remember that, and I
yeah.
remember it being like it was like 30 minutes or 35 minutes or something, so like it was a chunk of a fight, and I remember watching it and being like, holy shit, this is incredibly brutal, and it is a really brutal fight. And on top of that, it's like this is one of those fights where we talked before the show where it's like in another era, another referee, Rocky Marciano might have very well been stopped in this fight. And toward the end, Charles could have been too, dude. Charles toward the end was starting to just look straight ragged. But like in a maybe like rounds like I want to say it was like 11, 12, 13, Marciano was just looking like absolute shit and bleeding all over the place and could have very well just been stopped. And in any case, Marciano wins the decision. The fight is considered, if I'm not mistaken, the fight of the year, but like just a bloody, disgusting fight. Of course, you're going to have a rematch of that fight. And similarly, the video of the rematch is kind of short. It's incomplete. And, I wish there were more of it. But even so, this was the infamous tear up the fucking nostril fight, which in almost any other circumstance whatsoever would have absolutely been stopped. I mean, this shit was not a tiny fucking cut. We're talking about like his nostril split up to like the bridge of his nose, like flapping, flopping, bleeding all over the fucking place. Everybody going, "Oh, like fucking he's dying," hiding fucking eyes like women and children type of shit. And they let the fight go on because, perhaps because it's Rocky Marciano, no clue. But in any case, it went on and he wound up rallying and getting the eighth round knockout of Ezra Charles in their rematch, which I think also really helped boost that kind of mythos of Rocky Marciano being this
Oh, a
undefeated,
thousand percent.
unbeatable guy who could take an unbelievable amount of punishment, which he did. I'm not trying to shorten that at all, but that really pushed that narrative of like, oh, he'll soak it all up and just keep coming.
Yeah, back then there was probably still people that remember Jim Jeffries that were a lot older that had the same feeling, oh, we got our old Jim back and stuff, you know what I mean? When they would see some shit like that, because Jeffries was another guy known for just taking the absolute shit kickings that he would before he would knock out Bob Fitzsimmons or getting slapped around him but for 20 rounds by Jim Corbett before he would just land one
Yeah,
punch and lay
I
him
can't even
out.
imagine just getting like battered by Bob Fitzsimmons round after
Especially with
round.
them fucking skin tight gloves, bro. You imagine just
Jesus.
Fitzsimmons just slicing your face up like a crude butcher. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I probably would have just quit before then, but that's what
I
makes
mean,
them them.
I wouldn't even get in the ring with him. I see that freckled freak with like the giant shoulders coming up and just
I'm
looking at me
out.
staring. Yeah, I'm good. Here, brother, take my purse.
Yeah, I'm not
I'm
getting my
not
ass
even,
kicked
yeah.
by this guy. Fuck
You want
that.
you want my wife too? Here, take her. Like, I'm not gonna fight you. But, no, we've talked about this too. Is that like the Marciano show that he would host, and he would like watch old fights with people and stuff, and commentate on it. And then one time he was commentating on his own fight, and it was the Ezra Charles rematch, and he was like, and he mentioned it, and he was like, "Oh yeah, my," he was like, "I feel a cut on my nose." I go back to the corner. He was like, Charlie says it's not that bad. Everything's, people say it's gonna be all right. Just go out there and keep on going. Like 2 rounds later, he goes, all right, they told me that they were lying. The cut is really bad. I can't, he was like, they say they can't stop it. I have to knock Charles out. Like, this shit like that had me dying. I can't do his voice, but you know what I'm trying to do,
Yeah,
right?
well,
Like,
and I'm pretty sure that I'm almost positive that who he had in his corner for a cut man was Whitey Bimstein at that time. So if you got Whitey Bimstein in your corner saying like, dude, this is too much. I can't do it. You gotta knock him out. You're gonna be like, oh shit. I guess I gotta fucking knock him out then. Oh fuck. Because if Whitey Bimstein can't do it, then
yeah,
nobody can.
if him or Freddie Brown or any of those guys back then that had all their concoctions or whatever it may be, I mean, that was a gnarly cut. And I believe it was caused by an elbow. It wasn't even by like a punch because I can't imagine a punch being able to rip out a chunk
Yeah,
in your nose
it
like
was like
that.
he like followed through with an elbow
Yeah.
or something like that and cut it. Or at least
And
that's what the suspicion is.
I mean, it was just jagged, but to his credit, he was able to come back and stop him. Charles was also weary from that first fight too, and like his career never recovered. And
That first fight visibly took a lot out of him.
yeah, absolutely. And from there, Charles unfortunately had a just a long, dim, dark road ahead of for him. But he ends up knocking out Britisher Don Cockle, which was just kind of like a whatever fight, and then finished his career against the legendary Archie Moore, the light heavyweight champion, trying to become the first light heavyweight champion to move up and become heavyweight champion. And Marciano, obviously, from watching him, Marciano gets dropped. He has to go back and forth. Mora was a great fighter, but at this point too, like he wasn't really a heavyweight, even though he wasn't undersized at that era, if that makes sense. But against a
Archie,
guy like,
Archie.
yeah,
Yeah, like and I mean, he was a little bit taller than Marciano, so like they were about, like, I mean, they were about the same size, like
yeah,
overall. Archie cut weight for a 175. Like
definitely.
he made it known, like, to everybody. Like he cut weight and he changed his diet. Like that was, he wrote a book. There's a book about his diet.
He had an Aborigine diet. I think he said that when he would. Oh, he said he got it from them
There
where
were a couple
he would.
different fad type of things that he claimed, yeah.
He said that he would chew the meat and not actually swallow it. He would just like take the
Yeah.
juice out of it and then spit the meat out or something like that.
Yep.
Yeah, shit like that. But my he was also old as dirt. I mean, I don't want to say old as dirt because like yes, he was old, but he still had a lot of great years ahead of him, surprisingly. But including the Jovan Durrell fights and other ones
Yeah,
coming up. You know what I mean?
exactly. Yeah, he
Like,
was still light heavyweight champion. Yeah.
yeah, it's just incredible that like any other person would have been retired by then or in the twilight of their career, and only few instances like Bernard Hopkins and George Foreman were able to replicate that type of success. You know what I'm saying? Manny Pacquiao to a very small degree compared to those, but like, shit like that. And yeah, he ends up stopping more, and this is where the mythology starts because now he's 49 and 0, he retired undefeated. There were rumors of him coming back, especially at one point he was supposed to fight. He was going to come back and fight Ingmar Johansson when Johansson beat Patterson. And there was a lot of talk about that one. And I forgot the reasons why it fell apart, but obviously it didn't happen. And there was just other speculation, you know what I mean? Like Lou Duva claims, for instance, in I believe in the book In the Corner with Dave Anderson, Lou Duva was like, "Oh yeah, do you know me and Rocky Marciano are best friends?" I'm sure they were. You know what I mean? They're both Italian, both homies. Duva was definitely around boxing during Marciano's heyday. And he was like, "Oh yeah, he was going to come back to fight for the heavyweight championship, and guess who was going to be his trainer? Me." I, something just seems off about.
I
I
mean,
have no
I
idea.
guess maybe, but there's no real evidence to suggest that Lou was like in the fucking scene at that point like that.
Yeah, to be like, okay, Marciano was going to choose him. Maybe he would. I have no fucking idea. But there was just a lot left on the table. All right, obviously now the record is they're undefeated, and everyone is gonna like mythology. That's not even a word. Like put him on the pantheon of like the greatest of all greats because he retired undefeated. No one else has been able to do that, and that's the mythical thing now. He's gonna be 49 and 0. But there was a lot of on the table in terms of like guys he could have fought, namely guys like Floyd Patterson, who was the top contender at that time. You had Cleveland Williams, you had Bob Baker, Nino Valdez to a lesser degree, I guess. Like there was a lot of top contenders who would have gave Marciano a lot of issues had they had a chance to get to him. And I mean, I get it. When your heart's not really in it anymore, and your mom, I'm sure she was a big factor because she never liked him fighting, begging him to retire. Um, his wife, other people, and plus him probably, I know he said that he felt that he had a few good fights left in him, but when he retired, that was it. Like I said, he was going to come back to fight Johansson. I don't think he had interest in fighting Patterson for whatever reason. And once the Johansson fight fell through, that was it. And then just the only other, he was still active around. Like you'd see him at different fights. Like you said, he was doing television shows and still keeping his popularity and just being adored by everybody. But it was clearly seen that he was not going to come back. I mean, like, he had a fucking gut going on there and a receding hairline and just
Yeah.
he was getting a little punched. And then until his last hurrah, so to speak, when he had that weird computer fight with Ali where he was wearing a toupee
Yep.
and Ali walked in clearly out of shape. But Marciano, to his credit, because he didn't want to like, be embarrassed, came in shape, like went to work and he looked good. And so it made for a weird photo op where you have like a clearly out of shape Ali to the point where you wouldn't see them out of that out of shape again until around 1980 when he made his comeback. And then you got Marciano with a toupee and over there, like, kind of slimmed down and taking this shit as serious as it can be.
So like the official story from Rocky was that he had promised his wife and his daughter that he was going to retire, but then also he had said, if I remember correctly, he mentioned it during his press conference. So like the Archie Moore fight, Okay, so the other fight that I was talking about that where he is charged correctly with being just a dirty bastard was the Don Cockle fight, the only fight where he fought on the West Coast during his career. And I mean, he completely brutalized Don Cockle, like
Hmm.
was awful to him in the like I mean terrible. And Don Cockle got no quarter, bro. Like got just absolutely no mercy whatsoever and no intervention from the ref, unfortunately. But anyway, the last fight of his career was against Archie Moore in September of 55. And then it wasn't until the following, I want to say like April or May or something like that, that he actually retired or announced his retirement. And then during his announcement of his retirement, he was like, yeah, I have a nagging handful of injuries. And one of them was that he had a back injury from years earlier that he, I guess, had, nursed and had been a recurring injury that he kept aggravating during training and that it was making training a drag, etc. And then, so that's the kind of like semi-official story. But then now, over the decades, the story that has kind of, I think, become more popular among the history community is that essentially Rocky Marciano was really unhappy with his contract and the way that his career was handled. And he was also extremely wary of the fact that he was becoming increasingly associated with mob and ex-mob figures. And I mean, it's basically unavoidable on some level because we've talked about this, and I don't want to go into the whole thing because it's going to take too long. But basically, with the International Boxing Club of New York
Jim Norris.
gaining control of the heavyweight championship, that basically meant that in order to even touch the heavyweight title for years to come, you were going to have to know somebody. In order to line up, there was going to have to be some extraordinary set of circumstances where you just happened to be the fucking beastly ass man that beat the shit out of dudes, and you just left the mob no fucking choice, in which case they probably would kill you. But I mean, you know what I'm saying? So
Well,
you'd
bop
probably
you on the head like they did with Ray
yeah,
Arcel.
exactly. Take a fucking pipe and
Hype.
hit you over the head. And so, in any case, you had to play ball. And there were various associates of Rocky Marciano's that were clear mob associates. And if not direct mob involvement, mafia members. And so, I don't know. For some reason, that's become kind of weird to say that. Like, if you say that, like, you're like fucking saying some racist or something. And it's like, no, it's just what they fucking did. The heavyweight title was controlled by the fucking mob in the late 1940s and early 50s. It just was, along with like almost every other title in boxing for several years. And so, long story short, according to him, he did not like Alvile. He thought that Alvile was a bad guy. He thought Alvile was one of the main magnets for mafia people in his life, and that he wanted to get away from that contract, and that he had already tried to get out of that contract, and that was the reason why fights against Ingmar Johansson and others fell through. And he just said, "Fuck this! I'm just going to walk away from it and not even be involved." And that it hurt him a lot to do it, but that he just did it. I mean, I think there's probably a lot of truth to that, but at the same time, like he clearly was also getting out of shape between fights. And on top of that, bro, just add up the years here, okay? He fucking won the heavyweight title in 52, and by 3 years later he was done. Only three. And
Yeah.
look at the way he looked in 52 and then the way he looked in 55. It's like night and day. It looked like Barack Obama at the beginning of his fucking presidency and then at the end. Like, like the full aged, bro. Like a lot. Dude lost a shitload of hair. Dude looked like meaty and pudgy, was gaining a shitload of
Hmm.
weight between fights. So I think it was probably a combination of things. So, not to take that over, but to wrap up the whole retirement shit and what happened afterward. That being said, regardless of the reasons, he did retire undefeated, and that remains a large part of his, mythos and the whole reason why, and also kind of in conjunction with Muhammad Ali and his problems too, because that also, I, I'm not directly comparing. I'm just trying to kind of give an analogy so people understand where I'm coming from here. But like Kurt Cobain, like obviously extremely popular while alive, but like exploded in popularity after death, and also in
Yep.
large part because of how he died. But then, somewhat similarly, clearly not the same, Muhammad Ali and his controversy and losing his license and losing the heavyweight championship almost like made him triple in popularity. Like people were like, now I got to know what's going on with Muhammad Ali. And that was when this whole super fight thing happened with Rocky Marciano, where they basically fed these, whatever they fed into a computer and had them figure out by computer who would win. And there were various results, by the way. There were like if you were in the UK, you saw one version. If you were in the US or a different part of the US, you saw this version, blah
Hmm.
blah blah. And so, but that was part of the whole crazy thing about this fucking mythical fight, was that like Rocky Marciano retired undefeated, so he's got this air about him. And then you got fucking undefeated Muhammad Ali, who's like not being given a chance to defend the title that's rightfully his. So there's this kind of mythical thing about him. And so that's the entire reason why they got put into this situation in the first place. And that in itself caused controversy because Muhammad Ali was pissed off that in any version Marciano would have won, et cetera, et cetera. But that also kind of leads us into what we were, the latter
Yeah.
portion of what we were talking about
Oh,
today, which is who the
the,
fuck could Rocky Marciano actually ever even beat?
yeah. So, the finish up talking about like the Ali thing, in that same Freddie Pacheco book, he said, clearly I guarantee you he was definitely there for the filming of that. And that's why he was talking about, Marciano being in shape, Ali being not. And he said that when they were sparring or, doing their reenactments, whatever they're supposed to be doing for the filming for the show, for the thing, that there were times that Marciano was digging in a little bit on Ali, just trying to like, because he was getting that competitive spirit up and stuff like that. And it was just landing a couple of body shots that Ali clearly was getting annoyed by, because Ali was taking it easy. And Marciano was there and just kind of, nudging him, boom, 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 a few times. And then Ali was like going along with that first. And then, according to Pacheco and Dundee and others, that Ali started getting visibly annoyed. And finally, at one point, he didn't tell Marciano, but he told someone else. He was like, "Bro, tell him to like chill out." He was like, "Otherwise, I'm gonna I'm gonna get like real and beat the shit out of him, like right here." So like, and then Marciano like relaxed, I guess, and it just and apparently Pacheco was like, "Oh my God, an in shape Marciano against an out of shape Ali for one round. Oh, this could be amazing, bro." Ali would even out of shape would have smacked the daylights out of fucking old Marciano at that point. Let's be serious. If he got really annoyed and wanted to give him a two-piece, he would have, all right? Like,
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean,
you know,
dude,
and I could see him getting annoyed too. Imagine you're there just trying to play your part, and Marciano, like any other old guy, is just getting like really excited. He's like, and you're like, bro, what are you doing? Stop that. And then you keep on going. And it's almost like when you're a kid or something, you're like, stop, what the fuck are you doing? Stop that. And then finally you're just like, you know what? To
yeah,
like your
like you
friend or
gotta,
somebody, not your
yeah, you
kid, but
gotta
like
just
your
like
friend or one of your
somebody's
people
drunk and you
that,
gotta
yeah.
teach them a lesson or something.
Exactly.
You're just
Like your
like, dude,
drunk friend, like,
stop,
bro, what the
stop,
fuck? Stop
stop.
bothering me. And
Like,
I'd be
can
like,
somebody get this guy? Can you
yeah,
come get him? Stop, stop. And then fucking,
you
just
dumb
finally
asshole.
just fucking hit him.
Yeah, just but you know, and so the same thing you talked about Kurt Cobain, and after he passed away, like everything just blew up too. That sort of happened even though Marciano was retired. Like he passes away in a violent plane crash in was it 1969.
Yep.
And that just I'm not going to say that added to his legend because that's not the right way to put it, but like
Yeah, like his
it,
career was long over, but you know what I'm saying. Like
yeah, like that
it
just
almost
added
made
like
it even
that
more
added
like
to his
there's
like
no
yeah
way of
to his
knowing now,
adulation of like yeah like
you
no
know?
Marciano was like our guy because of what happened, you know what I mean? Like that was tragic. I think he was where was he? He was traveling home for either his birthday or someone or his
Yeah.
daughter or something like that,
And I mean,
and
he was only like, gosh, dude, I want to say he was only like, he was like, it's
he
like,
was in his 40s,
yeah,
I
he was
think.
something crazy. Like he was something shit. I don't even remember. And it's not even important. I just remember he was young as fuck. Hold on, now I'm about to look because now
Yeah, I'm
I
looking
can't
too.
just,
I
I
gotta, I
can't just
gotta,
leave it.
yeah.
But, he was 45, 45, Jesus
It's only
Christ.
45.
Bro, he was an old looking 45, if I'm being honest.
He was, but like that's it was one of those. It hit the world hard, not just the boxing world.
Yeah,
Everyone was
hey, I'm
absolutely
an
stunned
old
by
looking
that.
43, so I'm not trying to
Yeah,
fucking
that
yeah,
was
see, you got me
that
hurt.
was a major loss for the world. And then, like I said, that just kind of added to Marciano's popularity and adulation for everyone because of him passing away so young and the
Yeah.
tragedy surrounding it and all that shit. Like that made major news, and I mean, no one really like everyone was still reeling for that, especially Brockton. You know what I mean? So when you think about Larry Holmes when he was taking those jabs at Marciano, that was only 20 years ago that Marciano had passed away. Not even, actually less than 20 years, because that was when Holmes lost. That was 85 and
Yep.
86. So, like, that was about, like, what, 15, 16 years after Marciano
Yep.
passed. That was very fresh wounds for that whole place. So, like, bro, you
Yeah,
know,
fresher than when we're talking now about like Mike Tyson and like, that was twice as long
yeah.
ago. You know what I mean?
So, it's like, you can understand why everybody was, like, calling for his fucking head at that point. But, yeah, but the thing is, and now this was going to bring us to the part where we're going to talk about is that, like, after he passes away, it just adds even more to his legend and lore and all this stuff to the point where 49 and 0, 49 and 0, 49 and 0, who could have beat him, blah, blah, blah. To the point where you still on message boards today and people are like Rocky Marciano against Tyson Fury or like Rocky Marciano against the Klitschko's or like Marciano this instead of like normal fights because Marciano wouldn't be in the same weight realm of any of those guys and would not be a heavyweight today. So like, why the fuck would you gonna say could he beat Tyson Fury? I mean, maybe. I don't, I mean, Fury's such an idiot that like he could walk into something and just be stupid, but like, no,
Okay,
But it
let's
goes into the thing of like, well, how does he stack up against others in history just all of a sudden, like, like really stack up instead of just being like, well, he's 49 and 0 and he's going to kill everybody.
well let's just go here. Let's start with John L. Sullivan. And
Perfect.
we don't even have to fucking we don't even have to go like for like, minutes and minutes and minutes. But some of them are probably going to be quick too. Some of them are
Yeah.
probably going to be like, "Oh yeah, obviously he'd fuck that guy up," or "No, no way." So let's just go lineal only because in the 80s it would start getting fucking wild if we
Yeah. I
still
don't
went
need to
through
talk
every
about Marciano against Tony
lineal
Tubbs.
only. Let's just go lineal only and see where we can talk about with other heavyweight champions. So,
Love it.
Rocky Marciano versus John L. Sullivan. What do you think?
I'm going. Marciano beats the hell out of him, man.
Yeah,
I
I mean, I
mean,
think almost everybody beats the Chad John L. Sullivan, to be honest. I
well, but
mean,
according to the WBA, he's in the top 10 of the greatest heavyweights of all time. Like I said, this is the first time Sullivan got rated that way in over 100 years.
I mean, okay. Yeah, I mean, we have no video, so I'm not gonna claim firsthand knowledge, but
The only video we have is what him old and fat hitting that
yeah,
weird speed bag. Yeah.
looking at the speed bag like he didn't even know what the fuck it was. Like he was like somebody encountering fucking technology for the first time. And
And
he
the
was,
way they describe him fighting is what that he would run out of his corner slapping his left thigh before he was gonna like throw her right. I don't, it's just
yeah, no,
different times.
I'm gonna say he'd probably get the shit.
Marciano knocks his mustache crooked.
Yeah, get the
Hmm
shit kicked out of him. All right, well, this one actually could be interesting though. Corbett.
I, I was gonna say the same thing. That could be interesting. Corbett had the style and the way to stymie Marciano at least for a couple of rounds, or just move around the ring and make him. I don't want to say make him look foolish, but like definitely box him a little bit. But Corbett was also a frail guy who it didn't take a lot to really like get to him, and I don't give a fuck. I really don't like Corbett. Fuck that
Yeah,
racist asshole
I think
too.
Rocky probably
And the Rocky folds him in like 6 rounds.
knock his fucking pompadour right
He
off.
really would. Like, I mean, at that point, like Corbett is one of those guys. Yes, he lasted many, many rounds against Jim Jeffries, and by all accounts, looked absolutely brilliant against him. And yeah, I was beating the shit out of Fitzsimmons as well. But like, nah, by the time like when they actually started fighting back and really pushing on him, he folded pretty quickly.
So Fitzsimmons. So they're about the same height, actually.
That'd be a vicious fight, bro. I highly rate Fitzsimmons, and I look at him as one of those guys that in any era he would compete highly with anyone. Just because his boxing IQ was above reproach. Like everybody from that era, even the smartest guys like Joe Gans would say that like Fitzsimmons had the boxing mind that no one else did. And so that being said, the way he would study people know things and everything like that, he'd, give Marciano a fucking hell of a fight and probably put a lacing on him the way he did. Maybe not as brutal as he did to Jeffries, but he would definitely bust him up a little bit. Um, that being said, I could see Marciano taking him out in the later rounds, but he's gonna struggle a lot and get beat up in the interim before that.
Yeah, I feel like Fitzsimmons was probably a little bit more of a middleweight and light heavyweight than
Yeah.
he wasn't really much of a
Like,
heavyweight.
I don't think Marciano, I would be surprised if Marciano blew him out. But I mean, Fitzsimmons was just such a smart guy, and I have so much like regard for him that I think that he lasts a little long and puts up a hell of a fight.
And then this could also be interesting, Jeffries,
Hell yeah.
because I mean, like Jeffries was like fairly brutish. Most accounts have him throwing a good jab, but a hell of a right hand, and just a good ass puncher who could soak up punishment. And he's gonna be bigger than Marciano.
He is. Yeah. Up until,
Not by a ton, but he is going to be bigger.
I mean, he was, even till today, man, he's considered a well balanced, like, he was one of the first, like, legit
Yeah,
heavyweights of
about
that
six
time.
foot, 6'1", and about
Yeah.
205 pounds. So like not huge by any
But
means,
just stacked, bro.
but
He
a
was built like
good
a fucking
sized
log.
human being.
And could take that shit too. By the time he fought Johnson, he was washed and, hanging in a farm. He was like 300 pounds, made him lose all that weight. He didn't really want to come back, but they kind of coerced him into doing it, for the white race and all that shit. And, when obviously he just gets his ass kicked. But even then, he lasted that amount of rounds before he finally wilted and fell apart. He was just taking a beating. I mean, Johnson probably could have finished him much earlier and did what he wanted, but like, you know, he was a tough guy. So we're talking about in his absolute prime. We're talking about
Yeah,
like when
and I
he
mean
was
he
fighting
probably could have quit
Fitzsimmons.
earlier too.
No, for sure. But like if we're talking about like the Jeffries who beat Fitzsimmons for the title and was heavyweight champion, that's a brutal fight too. One that I would favor Marciano because I mean, as crude as he was, I think he was more skilled than Jeffries. But like, I don't, I don't think Marciano stops him. I think that would probably go the distance. In fact,
Yeah, I mean I think that would probably be a like a pretty brutish fight, just like two dudes who are
it's in the trenches, man. Ugly, brutal, wailing.
not willing to give
Not
up.
even like a lot of like high activity because there's gonna be a lot of mauling and stuff like that going on. But like, I just feel like Marciano would have the better technique to get through on Jeffries and opposed to Jeffries like weird, awkward handout thing that he would do and kind of, you know.
So one of the few guys then that Marciano would actually have a height advantage over as champion, Tommy Burns.
Wait, Marvin Hart.
Oh wait, yo, that's right. I forgot about Marvin. Well, some people don't want to count Marvin Hart because James Jeffries went back on his fucking that. How shitty would that be, bro? That like you fight fucking was Marvin Hart and Jack
Wasn't he the
Root.
referee for that fight too when he
Yeah,
fought
Marvin
Jack
Hart
Root?
and Jack Root, and then he referees them, and then lifts up Marvin Hart's hand at the end, and is like, "Yep, that's the champion." And then like 2 days later, is like, "Yeah, I haven't really decided." I'd be pissed. I'd be like, "What the fuck, bro?" He really
Kind of
did though.
like
That's how it
Jeffries kind
happened.
of pulling a Muhammad Ali in the late 70s. Yeah, I'm retired. Here's the belt. But then be like, well, actually, I'm just, stay in the limelight and keep on talking shit. But
That's, I mean, he didn't stay. He retired at least temporarily, but damn, that's kind of a bitch move, dude. It's fucked
yeah.
up.
But nah, I mean, Marvin Hart does have a win over young Jack Johnson, which still doesn't make sense to me. But, tough guy. But Marcy, obviously.
Yeah, a little bit of a flash, and I mean, Tommy Burns, like at least he's definitely not in the stature department. He doesn't have Marciano, but underrated and one of the first heavyweight champion to make it to the double digits in defenses.
Yeah. And also the first heavyweight champion that didn't go right to the fucking road show when he became champion would take years off doing it. Every other fighter champion up until that point, from Sullivan, Corbett, Fitzsimmons to a degree, like, I don't think Marvin Hart lasted long enough champion to anyone to pick him up on that. Even fucking like Jess Willard and, obviously Dempsey. All of them, Jack Johnson, like all of them would take their act on the road and go around and do all kinds of
Yep,
shit
just
and blah
turned
blah blah,
into a
blah and
celebrity.
turn into a celebrity as opposed to fighting. You're like, Jess Willard defending his title once in 3 years. Dempsey was taking years off of it like his reigns. Others were barely fighting, like kind of the same shit. Tommy Burns was the only one that didn't do that. He kind of had his own show with his own, cast of characters that he would defend his title against over and over.
Yeah.
Like who was that big New Zealand dude that he kept on knocking out?
There
Um
was McCarty or Luther McCarty or whatever,
no, Luther Picardi is the one that passed
or
away. So
fucking, oh dude, why, I know I'm getting too many of the big white heavyweights from that time mixed up, I think. But he
I know his name. Hold on, it's bothering me now because
well, Jem Roche or Roche, um the dude, Bill Squires is who
Billy
you're thinking
Squires,
of.
that's his
Yeah,
name,
Bill
Billy
Squires.
Squires. Yeah.
And the unfortunately named Dewey Smith. The fuck?
Oh, yeah.
Why? Why?
I
Why
mean,
would
he
you
did
make me
fight
say your name?
Philadelphia Jack O'Brien, which was a
Yeah,
legit
it's
defense.
true. Fireman Jim Flynn, unfortunately. Fucking Fireman Jim
And
Flynn.
then had Jack Johnson chasing him around the world, demanding a title shot until he finally gave in and fought him in
Yeah,
Australia.
Gunnar
And
Moir. And
yeah,
I guess say that is, I excuse me, I will say that is another thing about Tommy Burns that I at least find interesting, even though I don't know that it's necessarily an accomplishment per se, but that he defended the heavyweight title on multiple continents, in multiple countries. I don't know that it really meant anything at that point,
I
but
mean, if you're gonna fight
still,
Billy Squire 5 times, you can't do it in San Francisco.
yeah, that yeah, I don't know that they're gonna accept that at some point.
Yeah,
They're gonna be like, all right, you get the fuck out of here. But yeah, I mean, as far as Marciano goes, though, I know I remember for years reading in magazines like, "Oh, Tommy Burns was like the pre-Marciano, and then now that we know a little bit more and have seen like small amounts of video, I don't know how true that is. I don't really think he was really Marciano, but like, uh,
he was a good fighter. I mean, the video that I've seen of him,
yeah,
aside from
not like
Jack
super
Johnson,
skilled though, not like the type of fighter
nah.
who's gonna like run circles around Marciano in any case.
And that's another dude that Marciano would probably beat. And that's obvious. Like, this is early generation guys, and Marciano, being from a later one and how tough he was too, would probably bowl over a lot of them, with the exception, like I said, Fitzsimmons and Jeffries, who I think would just give him a hell of a fight. But, after him, you get to Jack Johnson, and this is where I think he
Mhm.
might take his first L.
And dude, I mean, like you know what might even be the more entertaining thing is looking at the list of lineal heavyweight champions and trying to figure out right where the line is. Like,
Yeah.
where is the line where after this there is no defeating anybody, Rocky? Sorry, but right here, from right here on, you're cooked. And now looking at it, I'm kind of just like, all right, let me
Yeah.
think here. I mean, basically from Ali on, dude.
It's going to be really tough. I know. I know.
Pretty much from Ali on. Like, I mean, I think he could probably handle Leon Spinks. Like, like I mean, I guess if Leon had like that first Ali fight night, he might just like slap the shit out of Marciano for like 50. I mean, he might get lucky, but he could maybe beat Leon. And then like on like a normal night, Buster Douglas, he could probably fight
Yeah, I think
beat
he can
Buster
beat
Douglas.
Douglas
But
if,
on the
like,
night
Douglas
that
wasn't.
Douglas beat Tyson, no, no,
No, no,
not that
absolutely
night,
not.
not that night.
And Douglas would beat a lot of great fighters that night too. But
And like he could maybe beat like Michael Moore. He could, oh
yeah,
yeah,
I
he
could
could
see
beat
that.
he could probably beat Shannon Briggs. Shannon Briggs would just run out of gas in like round 6. And then Hasim Rahman probably. But
Yeah,
I'd have to say that's probably like it, dude.
it's it's tough. I mean, up until so there's a few other ones that I might like give him. Okay, I could see it. Like obviously, I think Jack Johnson beats him. All right, like Johnson would just tie him up and just make things awkward and wouldn't let him get in there. You would take some
Yeah, he'd
punishment.
he'd beat the
Marciano would
shit
be
out of Jess
definitely,
Willard. Like
yeah.
he'd beat the shit out of Jess Willard.
He beat the shit out of a lot of guys small, like the same size of Marciano, smaller. He was one of the early proponents of knowing how to use his body and knowing how to just like distance and just everything, and it just would have been an absolute nightmare. Like I'd pick Johnson to beat Mike Tyson the same way. You know what I mean? Like Tyson was more explosive than Marciano and everything, but like Johnson might get clipped early and drop, but like I just feel he'd be able to stymie Tyson enough to win a boring decision at some point. Because we've seen lesser fighters able to do that to Tyson too. Like Bone Crusher Smith and Tony Tucker and so on and so forth. But Jess Willard, God, that would have been a fucking awful fight. Because like Willard just whatever and slow and ungainly and
Well,
that can
I will say this, like, just about every account had Willard somehow, even though he was the most pasty, non-muscled looking fighter I've ever seen in my life,
Hmm.
somehow everybody said he had like incredible endurance.
Oh, of course
So,
he did. I mean,
so
he
if
took an
that is
absolute
true,
shit
then
kicking
I
in
mean,
the Havana Sun against Jack Johnson.
yeah, I guess he could possibly just outlast Marciano or something like that. But like, I can't imagine it would be pretty. And if he were made to fight, Marciano would probably kick the shit out of him.
For sure. And then Dempsey, that's one that's like, God, that's been debated for since the begin. I mean,
Yeah.
since like first. I mean, Dempsey's always been in a million different scenarios because even 100 years after his prime,
Well,
and
well, it was like
go ahead.
finally in a mythical matchup, they had two white heavyweight champions where it was like, oh, okay, we finally got like two good white heavyweight champions that like we can pit against one another. You know what I'm saying? Like
For sure.
everybody else you look at and you're like, oh yeah, no.
But like
But
really, nah, I
like,
mean,
okay,
this would
Dempsey
have been an
Marciano, all
absolutely
right, all right.
this would have been an incredibly vicious fight. I mean, Dempsey, his accolades speak for themselves. We're talking about he was the first heavyweight that no one had ever seen before, that type of ferocity. And then you have Marciano that's just being an absolute brute the way he was. And you combine those two, and that just would have been a holy war right there for however long it would lasted, because it wouldn't last the distance. And
Can't imagine it would. No.
I'm actually on a toss up with that one because I can see both guys winning. You know what I mean? I can see Dempsey and his aggression and just knowing how he was being able to slice up Marciano and being able, stop him. But I can see Marciano just grinding him down too and taking that shit. While he's gonna be bloody, but either way, it would just be a brutal, brutal affair. Probably an all-time great fight.
I mean, I might go with Dempsey, not because I'm like, oh, Dempsey's head and shoulders of a Marciano or anything, but more just because like if we're talking intangibles, we saw more from Dempsey, dude. We saw
Yeah,
him get up and win on like on more than one occasion. I mean, we weren't there. We didn't see him get up and win. But you know, like, he got up to win. He got his ass kicked in fights and still won. And I think that that might put him over the edge over Marciano. But that shit would be a brutal fight.
very brutal. And then Gene Tunney, Tunney is one of those guys. I'm not a big fan of Tunney. I mean, just I don't know why I'm not a big fan of Tunney. He just something about him like irks me. But like
The fact that he never
he
fought any black fighters.
that's up there for it.
If
Yeah,
if you
absolutely.
bring that up against the history dudes, it'll be like he knew black guy once. He shook hands with him. Okay, leave him alone. It's like calm
Yeah,
down. He didn't fight any black people. I don't know. He just what do you want me to say?
that's one thing that's always irked me about him. Another thing too is that like the Greb fights when he's like, "Oh yeah, he lost the first one, came back, won all the other ones." Like there was other fights that Greb probably should have got the decision on.
I think
And
at least one of them he deserved the decision. However, everybody always remembers the first one because he beat the piss out of him, like starting
yeah,
from like 10 seconds into the fight.
one of the most absolute worst bloodlettings in boxing history. And but I mean, there's no regard saying that Tunney wasn't a great fighter. I mean, he clearly was a great fighter. He was one of the all-time greats, in fact. You know what I mean? The way he was able to stymie Dempsey, that the only part of the two fights that he lost was when he was on the canvas for like 12 seconds or whatever. But even then, people were like, oh, if Dempsey went to a neutral corner, Tunney would have been counted out. Watch that fight, all right? Within like 3 seconds, he's like stunned as fuck when he
Yeah,
first goes
he
down. You
got
can
with it
see
pretty
that.
quick.
But like you see his head turning and staring at the referee within like the count of what would be like six, but what should have been like six, but like referee started counting there because he was like too busy trying to push Dempsey away. And right away, like so he would have got up, like he was listening, and you see him just sitting there listening, listening. Then he gets up at nine, like he knew what was happening. He was very aware of that. Then he got on his bicycle, dropped Dempsey, I think like a round later, and won another easy decision.
Yeah,
But
the next round he knocked Dempsey down. So it's
yeah,
kind of like argument over.
exactly. And but like even as heavyweight, there was other guys there that he was like, all right, man, like Harry Wills by the time Tunney became champ was already on the skids because he had lost to Uzkadin and Sharky and
Hmm.
others, but like
Yeah.
could have fought Sharky, didn't fight Sharky. And then I'm talking this is after Sharky got knocked out by Dempsey. Like he
He
could have fought
fought
Sharky,
Tom
he was
Heaney
still
instead.
yeah, Tom Heaton was a top contender, but like meh.
But yeah, but well, and by
Schmeling was
most
was
accounts, not a very good
around.
fighter.
Yeah, and there was others too, and he was just kind of like, well, I'm just gonna go home and go read books and retire as I did. All right, all that being said, I think I can see Tunney being able to outbox him, And like, clearly showing like obviously Greb didn't hit as hard as Marciano, but he was much more of a windmill guy. And, he was able just to like, that's why he beat the shit out of him, stuff like that. But like Tony clearly showed from that fight and the Dempsey rematch when he got dropped in other instances that he could take his shit. Like he was a tough guy. You know what I mean? I think he'd be able to take Marciano stuff. And I think that Tony would eke out a decision on him.
I mean, I'm inclined to think the same. I
Yeah.
usually side with the boxer over the puncher if it's like, if I'm not sure or something like that. So yeah.
And Tony was a great boxer, and I think he'd be able to figure them out pretty quickly. And then, just to go on and win, he'd get bruised up a little bit, but he win a pretty clear cut decision. Um, the Sharky Schmeling, like I don't think much of Sharky, and I honestly think that Marciano would end up stopping him because Sharky is one of those guys that if you can get to him, he wasn't gonna like sit there and try to brawl and go through it. Like he was a very, very good fighter, and he has some solid wins on his resume from that time period, including thrashing Harry Wills and others. But like anytime you really was able to step to him, he would like show he would fold. Like there was that heavyweight from Chile who knocked him out. You know what I'm talking about, right?
Um,
You've posted a photo of him one time on the history page.
Not Godoy.
No, no, this was before Godoy.
Uh,
Rojo something. Now I'm gonna have to look it up because Sharky doesn't have a crazy record.
I don't know.
Um, where it goes. Yeah, this is gonna Quintin Romero Rojas. That's what it was.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
Quintin fucking yeah.
Like Rojas beat him, like Charlie Weinhardt, others. Marciano ends up beating him. Like I'm whatever. Schmeling would be a hell of a fight. Schmeling would have been one of those fights that, like, it can go both ways because Schmeling is one of those guys that could get stopped, but he was a better boxer than Marciano. He had a fucking monster punch, and he'd have Marciano running into his right hands over and over. Like, he would be able to time that. But that being said, I'm not sure if he'd be able to handle the pressure for all those rounds of Marciano coming on his ass like that and just banging away at him and trying to, I could see, I actually think that Marciano gets him late and stops him.
I think that's probably a pretty decent call because I
Yeah.
mean, like Schmeling had a good right hand and he was a pretty good puncher, but he wasn't a very big heavyweight. He
And he
wasn't a
wasn't a mover and stuff like that either,
yeah, well, and he wasn't
Yeah.
super physically strong either. So it's
Yeah.
kind of just like, he's kind of stuck. Like he's not really going to be the type of fighter to like jab and move. And if he stands in there with him, he's probably going to wind up getting his ass kicked sooner
Yeah.
rather than later. And so that brings us to Primo Carnera, who
Oh, Jesus.
I know, dude, I know. I'm not saying I'm picking Primo. I'm just saying that I'm kind of in the camp where I've seen enough video of him to feel like he's not the absolute piece of shit that I've always been told that he was. Like, everyone has always said, like, I remember reading in magazines always, like, when they rate like the worst heavyweight champions, like, he's always been like at the top. And I'm just like, when I look at video, I'm like, really? Really? Like, I've seen some fighters way worse than that, bro. And again, I'm not saying that he was great. I'm just saying he had a pretty fucking good jab. Not super fast, but like for his size, pretty fast. Good right hand. I mean, I'm just saying, dude. And he was a good puncher. Like if you fucking walk in on him and he catches you, you might be in some trouble.
Yeah, I don't know, man.
Not
Carnero
saying
was
he'd beat
so
Marciano. Just saying, I
no,
think that
no,
he's
no, no.
better than people
And
say.
I get what you're saying too. And also, yes, Carnero was completely mobbed up, and a lot of his fights early on were definitely, like George
Oh yeah,
Godfrey and others were
a lot of
completely
them
farces.
definitely
But
deserve to be scrutinized for sure.
when he beat Sharky, because Sharky boxed rings around him in their first fight, then he knocked out Sharky in a rematch, and Sharky said that he saw Arnie Scaff looking at him when he got knocked out or something like that. That's when, then he froze and Carnera hit him with the uppercut, and people were like, "Oh, that punch wouldn't hurt a fly," while others said it was vicious.
You could
It was.
see
It
it.
looked like a
That's a
legit
legit
punch.
punch. Yeah.
Yeah, Sharky got caught. He went down. He was out.
It
It is
is
what
like a
it is.
really weird angle too, so it's kind of like I could see it kind of like like like
Yeah.
lifted his head back, and it kind of anyway, whatever. But
But like no, he knocked
that's one of
yeah,
the fights that people always point to, like, oh yeah, that's a sure fix, and I'm just like, that don't look like no fix. That looks like a fighter getting hit with a punch.
exactly. Tommy Loughran, the former light heavyweight champion, one of the most brilliant fighters in history. That was a legit fight. That was, on the up and up. Carnera, that first, until I think the record was broken not too long ago, that was the biggest disparity in weight in heavyweight history
Mm-hmm.
between,
It was
champion
like
and challenger. Like it was absurd.
109 pounds or some crazy like that.
Yeah, and I believe Loughran said that Carnera broke one of his toes by stomping on his feet over and over during the fight. And Loughran countered it because he knew that Carnera was going to be laying all over him, trying to, use his weight on him. And that he got the absolute stinkiest type of hair mousse he could find, like some shit that was just vile. And he rubbed it all into his hair before the fight and had it all slicked back. Even his cornerman would just kind of like, ugh. And that anytime Carnera tried to lean on him, you take a whiff and he was just like, fuck, and just back up like, God damn, Imagine that with sweat and shit, just ugh.
That's
So
awesome.
I mean, that was a legit win. He defended against Uskadun as well, right?
Hmm.
Yeah, and that was on the up and up. And then clearly his massacre when he got destroyed by Bear was on the up and up. But like, um, yeah, I don't know, man. Like that's one of those weird fights that just like Carnera is so much bigger, but I think that
No,
like
I'd probably go with Marciano.
yeah, I
I'm
have to go
just
with
saying.
Marciano. Yeah.
I'm just saying, I think that most people would hear that and be like, "Oh,
Oh, I know it's just an
Marciano just
absolute
fucking
farce.
walk
Yeah.
over him," and I'm just like, I don't know about that. But anyway,
Absolutely. But Bear, that would be a wild fight too. And the thing about Bear is that, like, yes, he's bigger than Marciano. He had, I don't know if he was physically stronger, but I mean, he packed an absolute wallop of a punch.
mm,
But the thing about Bear is that, like, he wasn't disciplined enough for me. You know what I
nah,
mean? Like,
he
he
fucked
was too
around during
wild.
fights a lot.
Yeah. And he was gonna probably fuck around against Marciano thinking he's too small, and then eventually he's gonna walk into some shit and get knocked out from it. That's what would happen. Like, or he would try to pull like he did with Joe Louis, go out there and swing for the fences, which again would probably get him knocked out because he wasn't a guy built to last. You know what I mean? Like he had a couple of performances like Schmeling, which was probably his best one, and others where he looked absolutely brilliant. Not like skill wise, but just the way he was able to finish a dude and shit. But like I think Marciano stops him within six. Like Barrow's just one of those guys. He shoots his load early and then he welters. Um, Braddock, again, Marciano probably knocks him out too, but Braddock was one of those guys that he's underrated. I mean, yeah, the Cinderella man bullshit and everything, and he had a long slump during his career, but when he was on, he was on. And he knew how to box. He knew how to last 15 rounds or 12 rounds if necessary. As a light heavyweight, he was absolutely
Yeah, I was
brilliant.
gonna say he was a better light heavyweight, but
Yeah. But I mean, people forget too that he gave Joe Louis a hell of a fight before he lost the belt. Like it wasn't that he walked in there and just got flattened. Like he dropped Louis for a brief count in the first round, was, tight in exchanges with him for a while, but he was older by that point too, and eventually Louis catches up to him and stops him. But I mean, that would have been a good fight. Like Braddock, I could see outboxing Marciano for long stretches and like maybe being ahead and on the cards potentially before he ends up getting stopped.
that that Lewis knockout's so brutal too, and not because it's like like he gets like knocked out cold, but
Yeah.
Lewis hits him with that right hand, and it's almost like he's just like, no, dude, no, no, no,
Yeah.
no. Like
And
he
then
just
he
like
just lays
he like
down.
lies down. Yeah, he's just like,
Kind of
no, no,
similar
no,
to
no.
how Lewis got knocked out by Schmeling.
Oh, dude, just brutal. Yeah, just that's just like somebody saying like, no, dude, that's too much. That's too much for me. Yeah, I think that
Yeah.
I agree. He'd probably give Marciano a good fight and probably end up losing, in like a better fight than most people think.
Yeah. And then Prime Lewis. Well, I'm gonna go with Prime Lewis. I'm sorry. Like the Lewis that lost to Marciano was very competitive in that fight too, and not looking bad besides the times he was getting, knocked down and eventually knocked out. But Marciano ain't fucking with Prime Lewis.
Nah,
So
man.
I don't even need to like elaborate more on that. I already mentioned Ezra Charles. We already mentioned Jersey Joe Walcott, and there's no need to go there again. Marciano retires, and now Floyd Patterson. This is an interesting one because Patterson is Marciano's size, if not like a little bit. How tall was Patterson?
God, he's
5'10",
yeah, he's
5'9"?
nah, I think he's closer to about 6 foot.
Okay. But more
But yeah,
explosive than
not a very
Marciano.
big guy.
Yeah, more explosive than Marciano. Clearly faster than Patterson has one of the fastest hands in heavyweight history. Better boxer, but a guy too that was could fall into exchanges too often and do dumb like he
Yeah,
was
he
getting
got
dropped by
dropped too much, man.
two. Yeah, he's getting dropped, especially by the guys he was getting dropped by.
Yeah, by
I
like
mean,
some
like
scrubs.
when you're getting dropped by Tom McNeely and others constantly. I mean, even Pete Rademacher making his pro debut, like. I don't. That's one of those fights that was obviously speculated because Patterson became champion after Marciano. But like, I can see Marciano again behind on the cards, coming back and stopping him somehow because Patterson was just one of those guys that just he was always leaping into shit too. Like he was always jumping and like doing things like that peekaboo shit that Customato loved and
And then he'd get knocked down and it'd be like he'd get like knocked onto his back.
yeah.
Like too, it wasn't just like it wasn't always just like oh like onto his knee, but he'd be like fucking like flattened and it was like, bro.
So I think Marciano takes him. I don't know. A lot of people think Patterson might win. I could potentially see that, but nah, I'm going with Marciano by knockout.
Nah, I'd go with Marciano there. And then
Johansson.
dude, I will say it's funny because I was reading up on Johansson a couple days ago, just
Yeah.
randomly. That dude was a shit talker. Like he doesn't really ever seem like it, or I never really ever remembered. But reading up on it, like that fool was always talking shit. Like he talked shit and said, "Oh, like Sonny Liston, that guy looks like he hits like a bitch." Basically, like he fucking
Yeah,
um
right.
when Floyd Patterson beat Brian London.
hmm
He said, "Oh, Brian London looks like he couldn't beat my sister and all sorts of like." He was like, "Dude, he's just talking shit, bro."
And Brian London almost knocked him out. That
Just
was
saying.
Johansson's last fight. Johansson was winning that fight going away, and then London, I think, knocked him unconscious in the last round, and then he was
Yep.
saved by the bell. Yeah.
Yeah.
So like, um,
Yeah, dude. He
Mark,
that dude was talking shit. Just saying.
Johansson had a hell of a right hand, obviously. I mean, besides what he did to Patterson, look what he did to poor Eddie Machen. Just one of the more brutal knockouts ever
Yeah,
recorded in
one of the
boxing
worst
history.
referee fucking outings on
I
the
mean,
face of the
bro, his
planet.
cornermen are literally working on Machen, trying to like wake him up and make sure he's not dead, and the referee is still standing over him, counting him out. It's just, yeah, it's a very surreal, weird thing to watch. But I don't think, I mean, Johansson wasn't very durable. He could be a good boxer, but he was like spotty, and Marciano probably takes him. I mean, by the time Marciano was gonna come back and fight him, I might favor Johansson to take him out. But
Yeah.
Johansson beats him. I mean, prime versus prime, Marciano wins that. Um, that brings us to Sonny Liston now. And well, this is where the skits happen because I'm sorry, Marciano fans, but there's no way, shape, or form, any type of the planet that Marciano ever beat Sonny Liston. I don't want to hear that Liston quit against Ali in the rematch or he got outboxed by this one and blah 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 blah. Nah, Prime Liston is just an absolute demolition machine that no like the likes that we've seen similarities but not quite like him at that time. You know what I mean? Just his reach was
We didn't
absolutely
even really
absurd.
see all that much of him. Like in his
Yeah, I
you know
mean,
what I
him
mean?
in his
Like
absolute prime, there's not much footage of it. We see him past his prime, and no one really knew his real age back then. So who knows? But all I do know is that he was just beating the fucking daylights out of anyone who like stepped in his way. And people rarely go in the distance. And I mean, we're talking about the heavyweights that Patterson was avoiding back then. Guys like Cleveland Williams, who he thrashed twice. Yes, it was both of them were absolute wars, but like he knocked the hell out of him. Zora Foley, who just got thrashed. Eddie Machen, who happened to go the distance, but I mean, he just made sure that he was gonna go the distance, not like he was trying to win. Nino Valdez, Burt Whitehurst, the rematch with Marty Marshall. I think he beat him in a third fight. Like, Johnny Summerlin, I believe he beat. Like, there's so many names that he was just beating the fucking crap out of these dudes, bro. Like, it was bad. You know what I mean? It wasn't a heavyweight back then that wanted to fight him. That's why even fucking the Kennedys reached out to Patterson. They were like, please don't fight this man. Also, too, because of his fucking background, being mobbed up and all this other stuff. But like, head to head, no, that's an absolute disaster mission for Marciano. Like, there's no way, and I don't care how much of a prime he is, he's not going to win that fight. Like, Liston's going to beat the daylights out of him.
and I just like I said, like beyond that, dude, it's the beyond that point in history. I mean, you have
Yeah, we don't even need to go one by one at this point
no,
because
dude.
like
Like I said, like I think the only ones that I would look beyond that and be like, yeah, they have a chance or Marciano could beat him is Leon Spinks, Buster Douglas, and Michael Moore, maybe, and Shannon Briggs, maybe, Hasim Rahman, maybe. And the problem with almost every single one of those names named is that almost every single one of them hits harder. I'm not saying they're a better puncher, but hits harder than every opponent that Rocky Marciano ever faced. And I know some people are going to say, "Oh, what about Archie Moore? You know, he scored all the knockouts." I know, but the vast majority of those were at middleweight and light heavyweight. And when he did get to heavyweight, he was scoring some knockouts, but a lot of the heavyweight knockouts he was scoring were not ranked heavyweights. Just being real here. I love Archie Moore, nothing against him, but we're not talking about the quality of Archie Moore as a fighter. We're talking about looking at Archie Moore as a fighter and as an opponent and saying, okay, does that represent anything that other great heavyweights would have against Marciano? And like, no, not really. No. You know, are there any
yeah,
other fighters that Rocky Marciano fought when he fought them that would be a good representation? You know what I mean? He didn't even fight Prime Ezard Charles and almost lost twice. And so already we're kind of getting into a territory, in my opinion, where I know this is going to make people mad, but it's like we're getting into a territory where like he already almost lost to the guys that he just barely beat. And those were not very big heavyweights, none of them big punchers, and then on top of that still got knocked down by more than one of them, and then almost lost to a few of them, and dude got was in trouble against Archie Moore.
yeah,
So I think we're just kind of you enter territory with Marciano, dude, where we don't even know, like, I mean, okay, just use your extrapolation powers of extrapolation here and be like, all right, Lennox Lewis lines up Rocky Marciano with just a fucking banger of a right hand. Does Marciano take that shit and stay upright? And I'm saying absolutely there's just no way whatsoever it would ever happen on this fucking planet. Dude would be either asleep or just, useless in that fight. And, obviously that's an extreme example because Lennox Lewis is one of the harder punchers among the heavyweight champions, but you don't even need to go that far, dude. You know, it, you just don't have any examples from Rocky Marciano's career where he's taking punches like that and winning. You're even facing anybody who can punch like that. And the vast majority of them are like, biggest they're clocking in is like 6'2", 210. Like
yeah.
biggest
I
tops.
I would, I would not to say that he would win, but I would give him a chance against Mike Tyson, especially Mike Tyson, because Tyson could be spotty.
Yeah, I mean that's
That's
true.
why.
Yeah, yeah.
You know what I mean?
Like
Even
mentally if
even
like
in even like during his rampage in the early days, like he could be a little
yeah, like
spotty
if
and
Marciano
things.
stands in there for the first few rounds, Mike just might fold. That's true.
Yeah, there's
He might.
just I mean, that's just the way Mike was. Like we've seen him struggle against lesser guys. I mean, I'm not even talking about like, I'm not saying skill wise. I'm just saying like, guys that Mike had shouldn't have been struggling with a little bit. Like, Quick Tillis, obviously when the things get tough, he would just kind of maul and fall into things and other guys like that. But like, you know,
Yeah,
I
Mitch
could
Green
that
a
would
little bit, yeah.
yeah, if Marciano could survive the first wave of like, he probably would get dropped early on because like Tyson was so explosive and he would come out there and he'd hit him. And you can see that Marciano, if he got caught early, sometimes he would get caught cold and, he'd get dropped by that. It happened against Walcott, like you said, it happened against Marcy Moore and presumably it might happen against Mike. But if he can go past 5 rounds, I could see him being able to take over that fight and be able to like eventually get the better of him or something like that. Like that'd be a hell of a fight. That just depends on again what kind of mood Mike was in and if he was actually ready for it and not just wanting to go 3 rounds and say fuck it. Um,
Like Foreman.
yeah, God, I mean, jeez, like
That
that
would be
doesn't
so
that shouldn't.
ugly.
Yeah, that doesn't even count because Foreman has already shown that like he just swats around little guys. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Look
that
what he
would
did to
it
Joe
just
Frazier.
stylistically a terrible
What
matchup.
he was gonna do to Mike Tyson had they fought in 1990 and just others. He just keeps on shoving you away. He just would have kept on shoving him and shoving him. And then whenever he topped in, he'd finally just be like boom, boom, and then that's all she wrote. That
Yeah, it would
just
have been ugly.
yeah, Foreman's just a freak that he has to be compared to just other like freaks in nature from that time. Marciano, that's not even fair. And it's like who's the other one? Frazier. Not to say that Marciano would win, but that would be a brutal fight. That would go a long time. Like Frazier was not a guy that was going to blow Marciano out. Marciano would take again. He might get dropped early on, but like he would get up and definitely lay some
Kind of
blows on Frazier.
like that first Corey fight.
Yeah. Oh yeah, yeah. It would just be a brutal, brutal fight that I can see Frazier eventually prevailing in because he was just more of a machine in that way of what, surging and everything like that. And I think he was, better fundamentals and just overall. But like, I've played that fight many times on Fight Night and other various games over there, and each one has always been like a fucking on rock'em sock'em, knock down each guy four times type
Hell
fight. And I can totally see that scenario happening in a real one too between those two. You know
yeah.
what I mean? Like that would be
Yeah, no
awesome. That would have been
question.
an awesome fight, definitely. And you know, that's unfortunate. Like you said, any other like lineal champion from that time, I can't really see
Well,
Marciano doing much with. Larry
even
Holmes would have jabbed him up.
like
Um,
stylistically, like Evander Holyfield could be a fun fight,
oh yeah, that'd be a
but
hell of a
he's
fun
got too
fight.
much
Yeah.
size on him, dude. Like it even Evander Holyfield, like the small heavyweight, 6'2", 220.
Hmm.
No way, dude. No way.
No, and especially Marciano against Holyfield with hair would have been fun because that was all right. I'll say that. You know what I mean? Before his hair
Yeah, like
fell
Burt
out and
Cooper. Yeah, like the Burt Cooper version. Like that could have been a banger against.
absolutely, like because Holyfield with hair was still like, even though he beat Buster Douglas and was heavyweight champion, he was still growing into the role of being a heavyweight. Like he wasn't fully on the juice yet. He wasn't bald, on bald head and stuff like that, and
Yep.
he was still more prone to getting, like you said, to getting hit. And his stamina wasn't great too. Like George Benton used to say that his stamina wasn't good early on when he was training him, and he would have to like cut rounds and make Holyfield think he was going 3 rounds and 3 minutes and things like that. You know what I'm saying? Like. But yeah, the Holyfield when he still had like a mini high top and all that, that could have been fun. Like Marciano definitely could have caught him, and Holyfield have getting spaghetti leg for a minute before rallying to come back to win
Yep.
and such. But the one that you're talking about, like from the Tyson era and things like that, nah, that's just definitely. Um, Bo, another one. Like Bo is just too big. He was a great inside fighter as well, so that just would have been an absolute nightmare. Um. And then yeah, I mean, listen, there's a lot of like alphabet titleists that I would
Yeah,
favor
yeah. That
Marciano to
we could.
beat. Like,
Yeah,
but I mean, I don't. That's that. Like, for
yeah.
when it
That's
comes
too.
to the
Especially
lineal
in like the
champions,
'80s and then like the 2000s and shit. Like we get it,
yeah,
man.
but when it comes to the lineal champions after Patterson, the road gets kind of dark for him.
It's tough, dude. And I mean, I'm sorry. Like, well, no, I'm not sorry. I don't care. But like, I'm sorry if people are like got their feelings hurt about it. But like, it's just, I think that we're talking about, look, dude, we're just looking on paper. The reality is, Rocky Marciano never really got much bigger than about 190 pounds. He's about like, 5'10 ish. I know that many people have said over the years, he's like 5'6, he's 5'7. He's taller than that, but he was not a big guy, and he also had short arms. He did not have
Yep.
very good reach. In case people didn't know, you might not know this if it was something you just didn't like learn, but your reach should be almost exactly what your height is. Your
Hmm.
reach and your height should be pretty much the same thing. And so, that's why you see a dude who's about 6 foot tall, it should have about 72-inch reach, 72 inches, 6 feet. But then you get Rocky Marciano, who's 5'10, and his reach does not match up. It's short a few inches. He's got
Yep.
short arms, and so that's reflected in his style. He even said it. I remember he did an interview where he talked about like, yeah, that's exactly why my style is the way that my style is because I got short arms. So I got to like, jump in on opponents, otherwise they're going to keep me on the end of their jab and blah blah blah. And so that leaves him vulnerable, doing that you see that reflected in a number of his fights where his face is all beat to shit. And then on top of that, he's Italian, just like, us Irish dudes. You get hit in the face and all of a sudden, your whole shit turns red. You're fucked. And so now these days, with good referees, bro, Marciano had been stopped. And who knows how many of his fights where he got cut and then was allowed to keep going. So, we're talking about a combination of a different time and a different era, whereas Marciano wouldn't even be a heavyweight now. He would probably be a light heavyweight where
Hmm.
he's, cutting from 185 to 175 or something like that and just dying. But that's just the reality of what fighters do now. with day before weigh-ins and shit like that. So that being said, I think he's kind of like just in at least with us, where we're not really picking him against a whole lot of these lineal and great heavyweights. He's kind of a victim of the times, a victim of his own era, etc. He couldn't choose which era he was born into, but also, if he were born into a different era, he probably would not have retired undefeated. So
1,000%.
that's the flip side of it.
No, I mean it's absolutely true. He would have been a light heavyweight today, and like it's cool to speculate how he would have done against some of those two because like think about him and Dwight Cowie, for instance.
Yeah, that shit gets way more fucking fun and
Yeah,
way more interesting if you look at it like that, in my opinion.
like him and Cowie would have been an absolute banger. Cowie was one of the great light heavyweight champions. Only 5'7", but grew into a cruiserweight. Had the greatest cruiserweight fight
Or
ever
him
with
versus like
Holyfield.
Montel Griffin on his best day.
Oh God, I mean Marciano probably stops Griffin, but
I
like,
mean, but
yeah.
just the style,
Of
mix
course,
is like,
yeah,
oh,
yeah.
that's fucking weird.
Like Marciano, think of him against Crew, like I said, him against Cowie
James
would have
Tony,
been, oh my God, that would have been a great fight.
that'd been
Like Tony
crazy.
clear, and here's the thing about that one too,
James
is that
Tony
like
calling him a fat piggy in his ear the whole fight and shit. You know,
Tony would counter the shit out of Marciano and be on the ropes, but the problem is that Tony would be on the ropes a lot of the fucking time. And just laying there, and even though Marciano might not be hitting him clean in the head, he's gonna be hitting him in the shoulders and arms and hips and every other part of that body
absolutely.
that Tony is just gonna be like,
See, this shit gets way more interesting when you
yeah,
start
that
going
would have been
down
a
to like cruiserweight, light
fascinating fight.
heavyweight. But
At cruiserweight, that would have been an absolutely fascinating fight because Tony would have been doing the same thing he did with Giroff. And Marciano hits a lot harder than Giroff did. Maybe not have the same work rate, but like, he would have been there grinding on him. And then Tony's going to be hitting him with uppercuts and right hands, but he's going to be feeling that shit and dropping his arms after a while because Marciano's just going to caveman club him all over the place. And
absolutely, dude.
that would have been a close fight. I mean, I favor Tony slightly, but like, I was not going to be an easy decision for him to win. Um, Roy Jones, well, Roy could probably box rings around him, but also Roy can get stupid sometimes and drop his hands. And if he gets caught, he gets
Yeah,
caught.
remember even Ruiz caught him just that once
He
in their
did in
fight.
like the first round. And you saw
Yeah.
Jones's
And Roy
legs
was
go
kind
all
of like
spaghetti
wobble
leg.
for just a
Yeah.
second, and it was like, oh, but then he got a hold of it.
And that's a good call because not many people would even remember that. Like it happened so briefly, but if you paid
Yeah,
attention,
I
you would
remember
see
that
his
shit.
legs go like, ooh. And I'm like, oh God, is he gonna do it?
I know, dude. And my first thought was simultaneously, oh my God, that's so crazy. And oh God, I hope not. Oh my God.
Oh man, Don King would have shoved him down his throat even worse than he already did.
Yeah, well, we would have seen more Stony. That's for sure.
Flip side,
Yeah, so there's a good to everything. And
but
it's
go
dude,
ahead.
like it's nothing against Rocky Marciano personally. And like we should probably emphasize that. Seemed like a decent enough guy. Seemed like a nice dude, funny guy, good sense of humor. Nothing against him. It's just, you look at we even some of the
Yep.
fighters we've mentioned, like Fitzsimmons. You know what I mean? Like a totally different style to be able to go up and weight and do better against bigger fighters. Not Marciano though.
Yeah, I mean, totally. And not only that, like well, you add to all of that, and I mean, the Marciano earns his place where he is. He's one of the great heavyweights in history. His record and his aura is what places him higher than probably what he should be. But he does rank among the top 15 to 20 in history. I mean, he ranks in the higher end of that,
Right.
not like in the top
And
15,
no
but
amount
like
of podcast shit talk is going to change that.
no, 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 and absolutely not. And like, and the other thing too I wanted to add before we end today is that what's I find hilarious is that record has become even more mythical because of the few times people have come to approach it. I'm talking about a heavyweight, and then some bullshit happens where they're like, "Oh, the Marciano hex happened." Like, we mentioned Larry Holmes. Well, obviously that was the most famous one, but then years later, on a much lighter note, but still like on a much lesser note, we're talking Brian Nielsen,
Okay, good.
who was a
I was like, yeah, he's gonna bring up the Danish,
yeah, the Danish heavyweight. Who,
they start
all
calling
right,
him
listen.
full the cheese Danish and shit.
Yeah, it's easy to make fun of him because he was such a weirdly out of shape dude that like for all of his fights in Denmark, um brought over an array of former contenders and never were's and guys that just didn't give a shit and all of them fell and lost under mysterious circumstances. Like I won't say mysterious, but like a lot of them looked like they might have taken a flop. Even Jeremy Williams
Yep,
came
I was
back to
gonna say a
America.
couple of them, yeah, even supposedly admitted that they took
Yeah,
money
Jeremy
to, yeah.
Williams came back and said that he took a dive and he got paid well for it and didn't give a shit. And if you knew Jeremy Williams, yes, he had an absolute pudding chin, but like the guy could fight. And so like seeing him
Oh,
get
he was a
whooped
great
around by
amateur. Yeah.
Nielsen is kind of eh. But I mean, Nielsen was a good amateur too. I think he made the Olympics and he fought, around. But to make the
Yeah.
Olympic
He
team
was
for
like
Denmark
300
probably wasn't.
pounds
Yeah,
or something. And yeah,
but all that happening, he was some stupid fringe belt. What was he WBB, WBF, some
something
bullshit? I don't
crazy,
know.
something that sucked. Yeah.
But he was he was 48-0. And everyone and all of them in Denmark were talking about how he was going to tie Marciano's record. And of course, they were like shooting that shit to the hilt and blah, 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 blah. So they import from America a journeyman heavyweight with an inflated record himself, but he was definitely a journeyman, a guy by the name of Dickie Ryan. And he was, Dickie Ryan was supposed to just go there and just, be another fucking blot on the belt.
But you can already tell just by his name, like shit ain't gonna go. Dickie
Yeah,
Ryan,
right.
it's over.
And he was what? And Ryan, from what I remember, I think that I'm sure if there's footage out there, Gray could send it to us or around there. Um, but I think Ryan was getting the shit kicked out of him the whole fight, Dickie Ryan, until like Brian Nielsen just ran out of gas. Well, completely ran out of gas. Ryan threw a couple of punches, Nielsen collapsed, the fight was over, and now he's 48-1. So like everyone was talking again, the Marciano curse struck again, whatever. But eventually that record might get broken. Who knows? I mean, there's a lot of heavyweights on the horizon today that are on the way up and now champion. Like you have Cabell, which I don't think he'll make it to 49-0, obviously. Um,
Well,
Moses Atuma, who I don't think will
hell,
even have 49 fights in his career.
even Floyd Mayweather, beat the record, but he had to fight bum ass Conor McGregor
Conor
with his
McGregor,
shit ass whiskey to fucking
yeah.
do it.
And there's more special. I mean, like I said, Sugar Ray
Fuck Conor
Robinson's record
McGregor.
of having 120 something wins and
Ugh.
only one loss is more impressive than fucking
No
Marciano.
question.
Willie
Yeah.
Pep and his records were more impressive than Marciano.
People
Like,
just love that
other
O.
people running these absolute like Harry Greb fighting how many times? Like 42 times in a year or some
Yeah,
shit like
dude.
that.
It's
Like
like
whatever
some
the fuck it was.
disgusting amount.
Yeah, so
Yeah, it's crazy, bro. I mean,
but
people love that O. I get it. It's okay. It doesn't bother me. But I think that also part of this show and you and I talking about this is just kind of being realistic
And that's what we did
about,
with this episode.
you
Yeah, it
know,
was just being realistic about where Marciano actually placed with this whole mythical talk about him,
right.
and it's I get it. Some of it is joking, like what they put in, like what come into America and stuff like that. But there are a lot of people there that legitimately believe that Marciano can never lose to anybody, and anyone that would
Trust
falter
me.
would crush.
There are absolutely people who would try to physically fight me and harm me for the things that I have said about Marciano today. Absolutely.
Whatever. I'd stand by you and throw hands with you, bro. Fuck that, because
Yeah,
it's
I
the
mean, hey,
truth.
I'm not
And I'm
saying
from
I'm,
that. And I'm
yeah,
from New Bedford. Okay, I'm
that's
from New
true. We got
Bedford.
a true masshole here saying it. So I feel
I'm
like I
saying
got
this, yo. I'm
backed
from New
up.
Bedford, and I don't really
I'm backed up.
particularly like Brockton either, man. You know how many times they used to kick the shit out of us in sports in
Yep.
high school? I can admit that. See, I'll admit that. Yeah, they used to like whoop our ass. But that being said, I don't. I go with Hagler. Hagler's my guy from Brockton.
Absolutely. Yeah, Hagler I'm rolling with for sure. No
Yeah.
question. Hey man, dude, this is fun. And like I said, hopefully this is also taken in fun. We do respect Rocky Marciano as a person and as a fighter. So anything we're saying today, relax, just
And
calm
not only that
down.
too, I think we gave a good
Oh
comprehensive
yeah,
review of his
bro.
career and all that.
We
So
didn't,
yeah.
yeah, it's not like we just like kicked him while he was down the whole time or something like that, dude.
Yeah.
Well, I feel like we spoke pretty realistically and fairly about what happened and who he was as a fighter and everything. So, anyway, but it does take energy, it does take effort, it does take know-how, and I do
Hmm.
appreciate you going through it with me. I appreciate you spending the time, man. It's always a good time.
Always, man. This was a good one.
Hell yeah, bro. Well, everybody, I'll go through my little spiel here. So now's the time to turn it off if you don't like the spiel. If you listen in to the Knuckles and Glove podcast through a podcast app, go ahead and subscribe, give us a rating, just a little, fucking tickle our scrotum. We appreciate that. If you go ahead and watch through YouTube, subscribe there, leave a comment. Not good socially these days. Probably not going to respond, but it's great. You'll look good. People think you're cool. Aris, we'll talk soon.
Have a good one, y'all.